Chapter 1063. The difference between the Elysium of heaven and earth and the spiritual cultivation with true fire was like the difference between heaven and man. Ling Yunzi had fought with Chu Xiu more than once or twice. He had to admit that Chu Xiu's power was indeed extremely powerful. Cultivating both the spiritual cultivation with true fire and the physical cultivation with true fire at the same time, Chu Xiu's current state was almost the most perfect state for a martial artist. His heart and mind were one, his qi and body were one, and his spirit and heaven were one. An extremely powerful physical body and a power foundation that had developed to the peak among those in the same realm allowed Chu Xiu to fight with those in the Elysium of heaven and earth. However, no matter how powerful a person was, there was still a limit. When faced with a powerhouse in the Elysium of heaven and earth who controlled the world, no matter how strong Chu Xiu was, he could only be stronger than the person, not the world. This time, Ling Yunzi did not use his pure yang divine weapon, even though Shi Yunzi had come with him. If he still used Ancestor Lu's divine weapon to deal with Chu Xiu, a martial artist in the spiritual cultivation with true fire, then even if he won this battle, he would probably continue to be laughed at by the people of the pugilistic world. Chu Xiu happened to notice this as well. He smiled and said, "Sect leader Ling Yunzi, don't you need to change your weapon?" Ling Yunzi said indifferently, "I don't need to change my weapon to deal with you." Chu Xiu clenched the broken formation in his hand and said, "Sect leader Ling Yunzi, you don't need to change your weapon, but I have a new demon blade now. Sect leader will be my first opponent to test it. Today I'll see if this demon blade of mine is sharp or not." As soon as Chu Xiu finished speaking, he had already made the first move. A hint of coldness appeared on Ling Yunzi's face. Although the long sword in his hand was not Ancestor Lu's divine weapon, it was also a pure yang divine sword passed down through the generations of Chunyang Dao sect. The sword light was unsheathed. In an instant, everything in the sky and on the ground was enveloped by the pure sunlight. Even though the peak of Mount Kunlun was extremely large, the scorching pure yang radiance still enveloped an area of nearly 10 miles. The powerful qi activity was like a scorching sun traversing across the sky, transforming into a domain that completely enveloped Chu Xiu. Tens of thousands of sword lights fell with incomparably terrifying might. When the other Elysium of heaven and earth supreme powerhouses saw Ling Yunzi attack, they all nodded subtly. To be honest, Ling Yunzi was not as bad as the outside world made him out to be. Although he had just advanced to the profound understanding of heaven and earth, he had accumulated an extremely deep foundation in the true fire spirit refinement realm. Although he had the cultivation, the heaven and earth supreme powerhouses divine, and had light, the demon's gang and spirit with realm and the earth and the god had and the earth and the demon and realm, and demon, and when one reached the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, it was extremely difficult to advance further. This included Rama, who was the youngest among them. Although he was talented and unparalleled, it was almost impossible for him to advance by leaps and bounds in this realm. He had to be like other warriors of the same rank and use time to accumulate his strength. Being in the Elysium of heaven and earth, it was extremely difficult to advance further. This included Rama, who was the youngest among them. Although his talent was unparalleled, it was almost impossible for him to advance by leaps and bounds in this realm. He had to be like other warriors of the same level and use time to accumulate his strength. Ling Yunzi had used his full strength right from the start, and it was obvious exactly how deep his desire to defeat Chu Xiu was. Chu Xiu's blade slashed down, and the long and narrow blade of the breaking formation trembled slightly. Although it was a demon blade, there was not much demon qi surrounding it. It did not look like a demon weapon at all. However, as the breaking formation slashed down, Chu Xiu directly used the Misty Slash's blade momentum to slash out. In an instant the world seemed to freeze. Ling Yunzi's expression did not change, but the sword momentum in his hand became even more ferocious. He naturally recognized Dugu Weiwei's Misty Red Dust Slash in the past. Many experts had died under this slash. However, when Chu Xiu used it, it was useless. The Misty Slash could confine a space, but it could not confine this part of the world. This was because this was Ling Yunzi's domain, and only he could completely control it. However, at this moment an unexpected scene happened. Wherever Chu Xiu's blade passed, the entire pure yang domain seemed to be torn open, and an endless amount of pure yang power leaked out. The sword radiance scattered and the Misty Slash fell. The two collided and suddenly, a powerful qi movement exploded. The explosive gang qi scattered in all directions, and even formed a huge vortex in midair, stirring up the wind and clouds. It was not surprising that Chu Xiu had blocked Ling Yunzi's move. If he did not have this bit of power, Chu Xiu would not have dared to challenge Ling Yunzi. However, what was shocking was that he had actually cut open Ling Yunzi's domain. Although the Elysium of Heaven and Earth claimed to be able to control heaven and earth, true control of heaven and earth was something that only immortals could do. The heaven and earth controlled by the Elysium of Heaven and Earth, to be precise, was the world within one's own domain. Throughout history, when existences in the Elysium of Heaven and Earth fought, it was extremely difficult to break the other party's domain. The simplest way was to use the domain against the domain and forcibly break it. However, only the heavens knew what method Chu Xiu had used. To think that he had managed to slash out a crack in Ling Yunzi's domain with a single slash, allowing the external powers of the heavens and earth to gush in. In an instant, the pure yang radiance dissipated and the domain shattered. Ling Yunzi looked at Chu Xiu in front of him in disbelief. He could actually cut open his domain? For the ultimate powerhouses in the Elysium of Heaven and Earth, the domain was only a symbolic means after they had advanced to this realm. Even without the domain, they were still the ultimate powerhouses in the Elysium of Heaven and Earth. Even when fighting with warriors of the same level, the ultimate powerhouses in the Elysium of Heaven and Earth rarely used their domains. You have a domain and I also have a domain. When two people used their domains to collide, it was equivalent to a simple wrestling between low-level warriors. There was no technical content and it was very boring. However, when facing a warrior of a lower realm than oneself, the existence of the domain could completely suppress the existence of the domain. This was also Chu Xiu. If it were anyone else, when facing the domain of the Elysium of Heaven and Earth, all power would be directly sealed so that one could not even borrow a bit of the heaven and earth power. While Ling Yunzi was stunned, Chu Xiu's figure had already rushed towards Ling Yunzi. The powerful qi movement seemed to be able to tear the sky and earth apart. As the blade fell, everything in front of him was accurately cut into two. In the eyes of the other powerhouses, it seemed that the whole world had been divided into three parts. The heaven and earth on the left, the heaven and earth on the right, and Chu Xiu's blade. The blade intent of the breaking word formula was executed. Together with the incomparable sharpness of the breaking formation, it went straight for Ling Yunzi. The might was enough to make the Elysium of Heaven and Earth take it seriously. At this moment, the Bukong monk suddenly said, "His blade is very familiar. Dugu Weiwei used it before." Everyone present was instantly shocked. The Ying family patriarch asked, "Did Chu Xiu obtain Dugu Weiwei's demonic blade? Listen to the spring rain?" However, after saying this, the Ying family patriarch felt that something was wrong. Although none of them had seen what the demonic blade, "Listen to the spring rain," looked like, they still had a description of it. It was definitely not like Chu Xiu's blade. The Bukong monk said, "It's not listen to the spring rain. I am referring to the aura of his blade. It is exactly the same as listen to the spring rain. These two blades are existences from the same source. They are supreme demonic weapons. Once they appear, they will drink blood and slaughter the common people." Luo Mo, who was at the side, said, "Don't worry, Reverend. This time the demonic blade will not have the chance to drink blood." The Bukong monk sighed and said, "I hope so." After cultivating the undying Zen, although he had reconstructed his body, his primordial spirit and spirit were still slightly damaged. They were a little sluggish. In the past, his spiritual perception was very sensitive. However, it was now a little sluggish. He could sense that something was amiss, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. At this moment, Ling Yunzi looked at the blade that Chu Xiu slashed at him. A trace of cold light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, he also discovered the abnormality of the formation breaking technique. This blade could actually shatter the domain. However, it did not matter. Other than the domain, it was not as if he did not have other methods. The long sword pointed continuously. The scorching pure yang astral qi condensed in midair. It turned into the two words pure yang in midair. It was like a huge rune that smashed down towards Chu Xiu. The two words pure yang were left behind by Ancestor Lu in the past. They contained the pure yang true meaning. The power of the demon-suppressing rune was almost at its peak. However, the saber intent of the break formula was too sharp to the extreme. Even if the talisman with the pure yang true meaning fell, it would still be cut in half when the saber intent of the break formula was displayed to the extreme. However, at this moment, the word pure on the left and the word yang on the right exploded with scorching rays of pure sunlight at the same time. Within it, there was a faint sword aura blooming. However, the sword aura condensed into the shape of a sword silk. It was like a golden thread that wrapped around Chu Xiu's body. In an instant he was trapped in it, forming a huge golden cocoon. On the huge cocoon the two words, pure yang, were vivid. The pure yang demon-suppressing rune was still successful. The sword venerable of the Windcloud Sword Tomb, Zhong Limu said in a hoarse voice, condensing sword intent and entering the pure yang. Headmaster Ling Yunzi is not simple. His attainments in the sword Dao and pure yang Dao connotation have reached the peak. In the Dao sect, his Dao connotation is unparalleled. He can be a headmaster. In the sword sect, his sword Dao is ever-changing. He can still be called a sword Dao grandmaster. He can split heaven and earth with his sword. For generations, the Chunyang Dao sect had used the sword as their weapon. However, the Dao sect was not a sword sect. For most of the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect, they would always focus on cultivating the pure yang qi. As for the sword Dao, it was just a cultivation method, a method. However, Ling Yunzi had also cultivated the sword Dao to an extremely profound level. He could even get a person like Zhong Limu to personally praise him. One could imagine how strong his attainments in the sword Dao were. The sword condensed the pure yang energy. Just as Ling Yunzi was about to finish off Chu Xiu, a shrill cry that sounded like the roar of a ghost came from the sky. The heavens' cry blood rain fell and landed on the huge golden cocoon, melting it completely. What was revealed was Chu Xiu, who was wrapped in the world-extinguishing fire and was surrounded by a monstrous demonic flame. In the next moment, a huge shadow of a demon crossed the sky. As if it was tearing the sky and earth apart, it grabbed at Ling Yunzi. Chapter 1064. As a supreme expert in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, it was not a glorious thing to fight back and forth with Chu Xiu, a warrior in the true fire spiritual refinement realm. However, Ling Yunzi also had to admit that Chu Xiu's strength had basically reached the peak of the true fire spiritual cultivation realm. The power of a single powerful martial skill was already not much different from the existence of the heaven and earth mysterious realm. When Chu Xiu executed a legendary martial technique like the heaven and earth conquering demon lamenting heaven and crying great compassion mantra, its might was simply astonishing. Ling Yunzi formed a Dao seal with his hand. In the next moment, the Dao markings on his body flickered and condensed into a complicated talisman that went up against the gigantic demon god's shadow. One after another, runes shining with pure yang energy blossomed, and finally engulfed the huge demon god phantom completely, directly sealing it. Chu Xiu frowned slightly. The gap between him and the mysterious realm of heaven and earth was not something that a saber could make up for. After all, the mystic inside of heaven and earth was still the mystic inside of heaven and earth. Even without a domain, it was still the mystic inside of heaven and earth. It was just that when Chu Xiu fought with Ling Yunzi in the past, he might have been forced to use the blood demon transformation technique to fight with his life on the line. But now he didn't have to be in such a sorry state. However, the consumption of both sides was equal. Even the current Chu Xiu would find it hard to endure the continuous use of the breaking word formula saber intent and the heaven and earth conquering devil cries heaven great compassion mantra. On the other hand, Ling Yunzi did not need to risk his life. As long as he exerted his strength normally, he could completely exhaust Chu Xiu until he was exhausted. Chu Xiu's strength was indeed powerful, but no matter how powerful it was, it could not withstand such consumption. Ling Yunzi seemed to have noticed this as well. Therefore, his attacks became neither too fast nor too slow as he slowly controlled the rhythm. On the pure yang sword in his hand, scorching rays of pure sunlight swallowed and spurted out, triggering the blazing sun Dao connotation as he slashed at Chu Xiu's sword. As long as Chu Xiu didn't use a powerful martial technique like the breaking formula, he would continue to waste time like this. Just like that, the two sides fought for a full 15 minutes. This was simply unimaginable in the eyes of others. Sometimes, the stronger the battle, the faster it would end. Fighting for 3 days and 3 nights was pure nonsense. A fight between experts did not allow for even the slightest mistake. Moreover, the strength and foundation of both of them were there for all to see. The victor and the loser would soon be known. Unless it was a fight between two martial artists with the same strength and combat experience, and neither of them was in a hurry and didn't want to risk their lives, then they would fight for 3 days and 3 nights. Ling Yunzi's brows were tightly knitted together as he attacked. He felt that something was wrong. This was not the first time he had fought with Chu Xiu. He knew that although Chu Xiu was young, his combat experience was incomparably rich. He should already know that he was prepared to exhaust his strength. He also knew that Chu Xiu had a secret technique. Although it would cost him a lot of energy, he would be able to unleash an extremely powerful force in an instant to fight for his life. Even he had to be careful when dealing with it. But now, Chu Xiu seemed to be playing along with his routine. He was so slow and probing with him, not in a hurry at all. Could it be that he only wanted to live a little longer? Although Ling Yunzi and Chu Xiu were enemies, he also had to admit that Chu Xiu was a very strong enemy in all aspects. And he also had the qualities that all the big bosses of the devil path had. He was ruthless, patient, decisive, resourceful, and crazy. Chu Xiu was not afraid of death. On the contrary, if he was provoked, he would do crazy things. Now, Chu Xiu's behavior was very inconsistent with his character. And up until now, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry, but he was a little anxious. Some people from the righteous path were already discussing in a low voice, saying that he had not been able to take down Chu Xiu after such a long time. They were obviously here to exterminate the devil path, but in the end they let the devil path master show off his power here and so on. The person who spoke was naturally not from the Chunyang Dao sect, but he could not control the people from other sections. There was also a strong person behind him, but they did not care. Obviously, they were a little dissatisfied with Ling Yunzi's delay here. Gritting his teeth, Ling Yunzi had to use all his strength to rush forward again, ready to directly defeat Chu Xiu. He originally thought that this time he could not consider external factors and defeat Chu Xiu openly. In the end, who would have thought that in the end he was still affected by external factors? Chu Xiu also sighed. Ling Yunzi could not bear it anymore. It seemed that he could not delay for much longer. Chu Xiu subconsciously looked to the west. How could the people from heavenly gates be so calm? Both sides exchanged a few more fierce blows. The powerful force had even formed a huge cyclone on the peak of the entire Kunlun mountain. It was unknown when it would explode. At this moment, Ling Yunzi bit his finger and quickly drew a line of runes on the pure yang sword. The scorching blood seemed to ignite the pure yang sword. In an instant, the long sword pointed to the sky, attracting the wind and thunder of heaven and earth. The brilliance of the blazing sun was like a huge beam of light. It was received by Ling Yunzi in midair onto his long sword. The scorching power came from the blazing sun. Even the divine weapon in his hand could not withstand this power. The weapon spirit let out a cry. As the sword slashed down, the scorching power had already enveloped the main peak of Kunlun Mountain. Within a radius of more than 10 miles, the power that was covered by ice and snow began to melt rapidly, causing an avalanche to crash down. At this moment, Chu Xiu did not use the blood demon transformation technique to risk his life. Instead, he turned around and the blade of the saber emitted endless apocalyptic flames. Like a spark setting a prairie ablaze, the saber slashed down. There was only a sliver of apocalyptic flames, but it ignited the entire mountain peak and completely enveloped Ling Yunzi. Domain. All the existences at the heaven and earth elemental illumination realm were shocked. Now, what Chu Xiu had cast was exactly the same as the heaven and earth elemental illumination realm's domain. The boundless flames of world devastation enveloped Ling Yunzi completely. The domain formed by the flames of world devastation cut off the connection between Ling Yunzi's supreme sword and the light of the sun, causing its power to no longer increase. There was a loud bang, and the power of the explosion in midair even distorted the void. The powerful storm forced the existences below the real fire spirit refinement realm to retreat hurriedly. Even the real pellet state's grandmaster couldn't resist this aftermath. The dazzling pure yang sword beam slashed apart the domain formed by the world annihilation fire. Although it was still very powerful, it was no longer the apocalyptic scene from before. The saber intent of the word break slashed out again, and the pure sunlight light was extinguished. Chu Xiu's figure retreated more than 100 meters. Ling Yunzi's figure didn't retreat, but the horrified expression on his face couldn't be concealed. His ultimate killer move was actually blocked by Chu Xiu, and it was even blocked in the form of a domain. How is this possible? Chu Xiu, who was blasted away on the opposite side, also breathed a sigh of relief. He was able to cause such power because Ling Yunzi himself was actually the most important. Breaking the formation could return all kinds of energy to its origin. Just now, when they were slowly exchanging blows, almost all of the energy that Ling Yunzi used was turned into extreme energy by breaking the formation. However, Ling Yunzi didn't care. Shang Tianliang noticed the change in the power of breaking the array just now because he was familiar with Chu Xiu, and he had time to observe carefully. But Ling Yunzi was in a fierce battle. How could he think of such subtle things? Besides, this is Kunlun Mountain, the base camp of the demonic cult. Isn't it normal for the power of extreme yin to be stronger and richer? As a result, he neglected that the subtle power of extreme yin at the beginning had accumulated more and more in the process of their fight, and it was finally ignited by Chu Xiu directly with the apocalyptic flames, forming something similar to a domain. That was actually not a domain, but the power of extreme yin was too strong. In that domain, apart from the power of extreme yin, he couldn't absorb any other kind of power. Ling Yunzi looked at Chu Xiu, and a smile suddenly appeared at the corner of his mouth. Before this, I always thought that my state of mind was strong enough, but I lost to you twice, and in addition to the comments of others, it made my state of mind a little unbalanced. But now I understand that there are talented people in every generation regardless of camp. You Chushio are indeed a rare talent in the world. At the same age, I am not as good as you, and even if I give you some time, the current me is still not as good as you. My Chunyang Dao sect is your enemy and it is normal to lose. If it were anyone else they would also lose. Because of this kind of thing, it causes the state of mind to be unbalanced, which is very ridiculous. Back then, you destroyed my inner demon, allowing me to step into the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. And in this battle, you helped me to calm my state of mind. I already don't know whether to thank you or to kill you. Ling Yunzi understood and resolved the imbalance in his state of mind. Although this was not very helpful to his strength, it could make him more peaceful in the future cultivation. However, while Ling Yunzi had figured everything out, Chushio was in trouble. Ling Yunzi said in a low voice, "This battle no longer has any meaning. Whether I win or lose, the outcome is the same. Chushio, don't waste any more time. I won't ask you if you are going to surrender or resist to the end, because I know that you are not a person who will admit defeat and lower your head. After you die, I will leave a tomb for you in the back mountain of the Chunyang Dao sect, and I will return the karma of my advancement to the mysterious realm of heaven and earth to you after you die. Although you are an opponent worthy of respect." After Ling Yunzi's state of mind was clear, he became very magnanimous in doing things. His words also made some of the warriors present applaud repeatedly. Just as he was about to let the others attack together, an extremely terrifying aura came from the bottom of the Kunlun mountain. The aura was so strong that it made the few mysterious realm existences at the scene tremble. Only Yi Xiaonan looked up, but there was a touch of excitement in her eyes. Red hair and black robe with a towering aura. Jun Wuxian didn't walk up the mountain. Instead he walked step by step in the air. Wherever he passed, the warriors would make way for him. They looked at Jun Wuxian as if they were looking at a real god. Seeing Jun Wuxian appear, Chushio was relieved and said to Ling Yunzi with a smile, "Sect Master Ling Yunzi is generous, but I will not use the tomb for the time being. If you die in my hands in the future, I will also leave a tomb for you in the Kunlun mountain." Chapter 1065. The appearance of Jun Wuxian here was not a surprise to anyone. Although Kunlun mountain was big, it could not accommodate two sections. When Dugu Weiwei was here, Kunlun only referred to the devil cult, and Elysium was almost slaughtered by Dugu Weiwei. With the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult, the east and west heavens slowly replaced the west Kunlun devil cult, and became known as the west Kunlun Elysium. So as long as Chushio rebuilt the devil cult on Kunlun mountain, the first to react should be Elysium. Even if Chushio did not kill the god general of Elysium, Elysium would not allow such a thing to happen. So in the beginning Ling Yunzi and the others did not react. In fact, they were also waiting for the people of Elysium to react. If Elysium could deal with Chushio, that would be the best. They could then focus on finding clues about Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation. But who would have thought that after such a long time, the people of Elysium did not make a move, as if they had tacitly agreed to Chushio rebuilding the devil cult, so they could only deal with Chushio themselves. The battle had not even begun and Jun Wuxian had already arrived. Moreover, looking at the imposing manner that Jun Wuxian was exuding, it was obvious that he wanted to completely eradicate Chushio's faction. Hence, Ling Yunzi and the others subconsciously retreated. If Jun Wuxian wanted to take action, they naturally wouldn't stop him. With Jun Wuxian taking action, their disciples could be sacrificed a little less. After all, Chushio and his subordinates weren't weaklings. Most importantly, there was still Yi Xiaonan. At this time, Yi Xiaonan was also looking at Jun Wuxian, and his eyes revealed a hint of fighting spirit. Last time in the primitive demon cave, to be honest, although Yi Xiaonan saw Jun Wuxian and Zhong Xinxiu fight, he did not understand it. He could only say that he saw a part of it. Of course, this was better than the others because besides Yi Xiaonan, the others didn't even understand the slightest bit. After refining the congenital demon seed, Yi Xiaonan's strength and realm had improved a lot, even to the extent that Chushio could not see through. At this time, Yi Xiaonan already had the qualifications to go one step further and pry into the realm of martial immortal that only legendary existences could reach. But the awkward thing was that Yi Xiaonan had no clue at all about this step. As for the realms above the mysterious opening of heaven and earth, as long as they were the peak sects from the ancient era, they would actually have records of them. Even the term martial immortal existed in a small portion of the ancient era's records. However, there were no detailed descriptions of the realms. So, no one knew if the two words martial immortal represented a realm, or if it was a title given when one's battle strength reached a certain limit. In an instant, it was as if he was thrown into the 6 paths of reincarnation and went through a whole cycle. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't collapse after being trapped for 500 years and that his willpower was strong enough to break free after experiencing a reincarnation, he would have been trapped in that endless reincarnation forever and become an idiot. But even so, Lu Jianghe's state of mind and primordial spirit were damaged in an instant. In an instant he spat out a mouthful of blood and his face turned pale. F***ck. What a loss. If he did not refine a true fire, even a spirit refinement realm expert would not be able to make up for the blood he spat out. Chu Wuji, Mei Qinglian, and those who were familiar with Lu Jianghe twitched their mouths. This bad habit of his mouth hadn't been cured even after 500 years. They felt that Lu Jianghe would die because of his mouth sooner or later. Lu Jianghe was also very helpless. The last time he saw Jun Wuxian attack, it was called magnificent. In the end, who would have thought that Jun Wuxian would even know primordial spirit secret skills? Moreover, his attainments were simply beyond imagination, and he was seriously injured with just one look. Chu Xiu stood out and shook his head. To be precise, it should be the divine generals of Tianmen who had bad luck meeting me. Over the years, although the divine generals of Tianmen have died before, the number of them who died in the outside world can be counted on one hand. But they just had to meet me and 2 of them died in a row. Shouldn't this be their bad luck? And Sect Master Jun, I feel that your luck is equally bad. Because as long as you meet me, you will meet the person you don't want to meet the most. Jun Wuxian was slightly stunned, but he didn't say anything. The 6 paths of reincarnation condensed behind him, and the shadow was distorting the space. It was as if the whole world was shrouded in his powerful aura. He wasn't good with words. Usually he wouldn't say too much to the divine generals of Tianmen. If they were right, they would be rewarded. If they were wrong, they would be punished. It was that simple. Chu Xiu had killed 2 of his divine generals in a row. He was already dead. What's more, he dared to come back to Kunlun. Because of some kind of relationship or some kind of fear, after Dugu Weiwei disappeared, the Elysians didn't attack the Kunlun devil cult, even though they had a great enmity. Even during the 500 years since the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult, the people of the Elysians hadn't stepped into East Kunlun to occupy this place. But Chu Xiu had rebuilt the Kunlun devil cult, and this was still challenging the bottom line of the Elysians. He must be killed. The power of the 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment light will begin to show. Previously in the primitive demon cave, although Jun Wuxian had been defeated by Zhong Xinxiu, his 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment light will had left a deep impression on people. It was so powerful that it made people tremble. Everyone present thought that although Chu Xiu could fight Ling Yunzi to a standstill, he wouldn't be able to withstand a single move from Jun Wuxian. However, at this moment, a strange tremor suddenly came from the void. The calm void was like a piece of wrinkled cloth, torn from the middle. Zhong Xinxiu, dressed in white, stepped out from it and said habitually, "Excuse me," but after seeing Chu Xiu, Zhong Xinxiu swallowed the second half of his sentence and nodded as if he was very satisfied. Very accurate this time. Hearing Zhong Xinxiu's words, Chu Xiu almost broke out in a cold sweat. In the past there were times when he was inaccurate. Zhong Xinxiu's existence was Chu Xiu's trump card. He owed Chu Xiu karma. This time, Chu Xiu dared to play so big because of Zhong Xinxiu's existence. It was difficult for a man to defeat the heavens, but Zhong Xinxiu's strength could undoubtedly defeat the heavens. He couldn't let Zhong Xinxiu kill Jun Wuxian, Su Xiai and Luo Mo, because they had karma on them. Chu Xiu had to settle for the next best thing. As long as he protected himself this time, it wouldn't affect his karma, right? Unless there was a karma requirement, Chu Xiu had to die here today. Chu Xiu could only blame his bad luck. And now that Zhong Xinxiu had appeared, it proved that his plan had succeeded. But Zhong Xinxiu's last words still gave him a big fright. From the moment Jun Wuxian appeared, Chu Xiu had already triggered the mark left by Zhong Xinxiu in his mind to ask for help. Although Chu Xiu didn't know how Zhong Xinxiu could instantly appear in front of him from the East Sea, an existence at Zhong Xinxiu's level must have a way. It was just that Chu Xiu had forgotten that this person seemed to have a poor sense of direction. If he had come a few breaths later, perhaps Chu Xiu would have had to take on Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment wheel. Previously, Chu Xiu was very calm in front of Jun Wuxian. But if he remembered that Zhong Xinxiu had a poor sense of direction, he probably wouldn't be able to remain calm either. Placing one's hopes on others was indeed very dangerous. This was Chu Xiu's first time, and it was likely that it would be the last time. Retreating, Chu Xiu gave the main stage to Zhong Xinxiu. The next main role would not be him, but the Mahasvara Heavenly Lord's turn to perform. Chapter 1066. In the past, Chu Xiu's plans would only start after he had great confidence. But this time, although Chu Xiu was also very confident, this confidence was under the premise that Zhong Xinxiu could act in time. Therefore, Chu Xiu said that placing all hope on others was a very dangerous thing. This was the first time and it would also be the last time. Moreover, although Zhong Xinxiu owed Chu Xiu karma, he only owed Chu Xiu karma. He only had one chance, so he had to use this chance to move all of Chu Xiu's enemies and dangers in front of him. Then, by borrowing Zhong Xinxiu's power and influence, he could deal with them all at once. Only then could he be safe. At this time, when Jun Wuxian saw Zhong Xinxiu appear, his expression changed slightly. Chu Xiu could even see that the corner of his mouth was still twitching slightly. He now knew why Chu Xiu said that his luck was bad. Right now he really did not want to see Zhong Xinxiu again. Last time in the primitive demon cave, Zhong Xinxiu had injured him, and he had just recovered from it. But as soon as he came out of seclusion, he encountered Zhong Xinxiu again. This luck was indeed not good. The expressions of the others present were even uglier than Jun Wuxian's. When Jun Wuxian appeared before, they were glad that Jun Wuxian had acted, saving them some energy. But in the blink of an eye, Zhong Xinxiu appeared again and stood on Chu Xiu's side. They could not imagine how Chu Xiu did it. The most mysterious powerhouse in the entire pugilistic world was the Sky Lord of Carefree Sky, Zhong Xinxiu. No one knew where Carefree Sky was and no one was familiar with Zhong Xinxiu. Not counting those who asked for directions, the number of people who had even spoken to him could be counted on one hand. This existence suddenly appeared here and stood on Chu Xiu's side. It was simply incomprehensible. Monk Bukong looked at Zhong Xinxiu and Jun Wuxian with a trace of confusion. The protagonists 500 years ago were Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. Whether it was Elysium or Carefree Sky, they had no chance to appear. In this world, he thought that the number of experts had decreased by a lot. He didn't expect that these two existences would appear. Looking at Zhong Xinxiu, Jun Wuxian lowered his voice and shouted, "Zhong Xinxiu! This time I didn't go out of the gate of heaven. Kunlun Gate of Heaven, this Kunlun mountain also belongs to my gate of heaven." Zhong Xinxiu nodded and said, "I know, but you still have to return to the gate of heaven. You can't kill him." "Why?" "Karma." Zhong Xinxiu succinctly spat out two words, but it almost drove Jun Wuxian crazy. "Karma? Karma again? What the hell is this karma that you want?" If the other Heaven's Gates warriors were to see Jun Wuxian's frenzied state, they would definitely be shocked beyond words. All along, when Jun Wuxian faced the other divine generals of the Elysium, he was always calm and even cold. The only person in the world who could make him lose his composure was probably Zhong Xinxiu. Zhong Xinxiu looked at Jun Wuxian with a strange gaze and said, "Karma is karma, what else can it be? Then today what if I insist on killing him and breaking your karma?" The 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionary light destruction wheels behind Jun Wuxian spun faster and faster. The other existences who had not reached the true fire spirit refinement realm looked at it and felt dizzy. Zhong Xinxiu gently pointed in the void, like ripples on the surface of a calm lake. In an instant the entire sky was covered by all kinds of powers. Earth, wind, water, fire, yin and yang, wind and thunder, all kinds of powers surged. The 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionary light destruction wheels behind Jun Wuxian, under the shock of all kinds of powers, instantly shattered. Zhong Xinxiu calmly said, "You know you can't break it." Below, Yi Xiaonan looked at the changing powers in the sky. The demonic aura in his eyes surged, and there was a trace of excitement. He knew that Chu Xiu had pulled him here to make use of his power, but with Zhong Xinxiu's move, it was worth it. At this time, not to mention Yi Xiaonan, everyone present had been shocked by the power. Everyone was silent, but their hearts were in turmoil. Controlling heaven and earth? Their methods of controlling heaven and earth were simply a joke in front of Zhong Xinxiu. Jun Wuxian looked at Zhong Xinxiu in front of him, and then at the 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionary light destruction wheels behind him that had already shattered and dissipated. He was silent for a moment, then stepped into the void and turned to go down the mountain. Zhong Xinxiu's words were the truth. It was not arrogance but mockery. With him around he could not kill Chu Xiu. The distance between him and Zhong Xinxiu was always so big. Jun Wuxian did not understand Zhong Xinxiu, but he understood him better than other people in the pugilistic world. So he knew how stubborn Zhong Xinxiu was about karma. Since Chu Xiu had karma on him, as long as he wanted to kill Chu Xiu, he had to pass through Zhong Xinxiu first. However, Jun Wuxian had misunderstood. The karma that Zhong Xinxiu spoke of was only the karma of that one time, not the karma of eternity. After seeing Jun Wuxian dejectedly leave, whether it was Ling Yunzi or Su Ci and the others, they were all silent. In the end, everyone waved their hands and led their people down Kunlun Mountain without saying a word. Chu Xiu's side did not stop them. After seeing Zhong Xinxiu's power that was so powerful that it made people despair, they knew that there was no way to fight this battle. Although they did not know what Zhong Xinxiu meant by karma, they could also see that Zhong Xinxiu had come here because of Chu Xiu and was on his side. How powerful was the Lord of Tianmen Jun Wuxian? In the end, he was forced to retreat by Zhong Xinxiu. If that was the case, then what was the point of them staying here? Moreover, they were not confident because they did not know what Zhong Xinxiu's character was like, whether the other party was peaceful or bloodthirsty. Anyway, since the other party was standing on the side of the devil, Chu Xiu, it was estimated that he had nothing to do with the righteous path. If the other party was bloodthirsty and they made a move and angered the other party, who could stop Zhong Xinxiu? It was not a good feeling to come to the door aggressively, only to leave dejectedly. What was even worse was that Zhong Xinxiu was almost the strongest person in the world at this time. With Zhong Xinxiu's protection, who could touch Chu Xiu? Could it be that the heavens did not bless the righteous path martial arts world? First, there was the news of Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation, and then there was Chu Xiu's return to Kunlun and the establishment of a demonic cult. Could they only watch helplessly as the demonic path rose? In an instant, all the righteous sects had been overshadowed by a pessimistic mood. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu breathed a sigh of relief. This situation was more perfect than he had imagined. Speaking of which, this time Chu Xiu had used Zhong Xinxiu's name to deceive Jun Wuxian and all the righteous sections. In fact, it was thanks to this person being Zhong Xinxiu that they believed him. If it were someone else, they would have gone to verify it, but it was because of Zhong Xinxiu's mysteriousness that they believed him. And Zhong Xinxiu himself was also very powerful. His habit of speaking was like this. He only cared about what he understood and did not care if others understood. The word cause and effect was very simple, but it gave people infinite imagination. No one could guess what it meant. Because of the unknown, there was fear. Yi Xiaonan cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and turned to leave. This matter was undoubtedly very worthwhile for him. He only showed his face once and did not make a move, but he was able to observe an existence at the level of Zhong Xinxiu in action. For him, this was definitely a gain. At this time, at the foot of Kunlun, someone was also rejoicing. That person was Zhang Daoling. Zhang Daoling had been following the instructions of the old Taoist master. He did not go up the mountain but waited at the foot of Kunlun to check the situation. If the Righteous Alliance won, it would not be too late to go up Dragon Tiger Mountain. In the beginning, he saw pure yang energy shining at the peak of Kunlun. He thought the fight had begun and waited to bring people up the mountain. Unexpectedly, there was a trembling aura coming from the mountain, which made him not dare to act rashly. When he could not resist his curiosity and wanted to go up the mountain to investigate, he saw the entire Righteous Alliance descend the mountain dejectedly, but there were no casualties. This made Zhang Daoling confused. He did not know what was going on and did not dare to ask. He could only bring people back to Westchu. But he was also very glad that this matter had nothing to do with his Taoist master's mansion. This storm swept the entire Jianghu, but it did not affect the Taoist master's mansion. At this time, on the mountain of Kunlun, Zhong Xinxiu looked at Chu Xiu and said, "Our karma is over." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Thank you, Zhong, Heavenly Master." Chu Xiu did not know how to address Zhong Xinxiu. It did not seem right to call him senior, so he could only call him Heavenly Master for the time being. After saying this, Zhong Xinxiu nodded gently and stepped into the air. In a few steps, he had disappeared from the peak of Kunlun. However, Chu Xiu seemed to find that Zhong Xinxiu did not go east, but south. He wanted to remind Zhong Xinxiu, but Zhong Xinxiu walked too fast and it was hard to say if he had other things to do, so Chu Xiu did not remind him. Looking at the people behind him, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I said, the sacred fire will not be extinguished, the diabolism will exist forever. The righteous path has suppressed the diabolism for 500 years. Today's peak of Kunlun is not so easy to flatten." As Chu Xiu's voice fell, the disciples of the Kunlun devil cult, whether they were new or joined later, all cheered loudly. They could not be blamed for losing their composure. The pressure just now was too great. They were surrounded by so many experts of the righteous path, and there were even 6 existences in the heaven and earth mysterious realm. It was not easy for them to not lose their composure and beg for mercy on the spot. Who would have thought that they would grit their teeth and really survive? Their Kunlun devil cult did not lose a single soldier and actually forced the other party to retreat. Of course, it was not that Chu Xiu did not suffer any injuries. The only one who was injured was not Chu Xiu, who fought fiercely with Ling Yunzi, but Lu Jianghe, who vomited blood after being glared at by Jun Wuxian. Chapter 1067. The battle that the Kunlun devil cult had experienced could not be considered a battle. After all, only Chu Xiu had fought. But it was more cohesive to the entire Kunlun devil cult than a fierce battle. After all, the diabolism had been suppressed for 500 years. During these 500 years, the entire Jianghu was ruled by the righteous sects. Most of the diabolism warriors had been instilled with the feeling that they were inferior to the righteous sects. Even among the Yinma clan, there were many people who thought that they were inferior to the righteous sects. Now, almost all the righteous sects in the Jianghu had joined forces to besiege Kunlun. In the end, they were still unable to take them down. This kind of confidence was extremely rare for them. Chu Xiu glanced at the pale Lu Jianghe and said to the others, "Take old Lu away and let divine Dr. Feng treat him." Speaking of which, Lu Jianghe had no one to blame but himself for his cheap mouth. Previously, Jun Wuxian's target was only Chu Xiu. He even ignored Yi Xiaonan, who had the intention to fight. Naturally, he would not care about an ant like Lu Jianghe. But the destructive power of Lu Jianghe's mouth was not ordinary. He specially exposed the weakness of the Elysium and finally completely angered Jun Wuxian. He did not have the powerful primordial spirit cultivation like Chu Xiu. He had completely relied on his own willpower to break free from the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. So this time, Lu Jianghe also, gloriously, became the only one under Chu Xiu who was injured. Although his injury was meaningless. Shang Tianliang sighed beside Chu Xiu and said, "There is always someone better. I'm afraid that the strength of these two has already touched the sky, right?" As Lu Jianghe was being helped away, he snorted disdainfully and said, "Don't be surprised. This is nothing. If you see the sect leader in action, then you will know what the real sky is." Shang Tianliang glanced at him and waited until he was completely carried away before saying, "It's a miracle that this guy wasn't beaten to death 500 years ago." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "That's why he should thank Patriarch Dugu. Otherwise, I'm afraid he wouldn't have lived to see the day the Kunlun devil cult was destroyed." Now that the biggest crisis had been resolved, everyone under his command was relaxed, including Chu Xiu. Back when Chu Xiu discovered the relics of the Heartless Demon Venerable and the Sky-Weeping Demon Venerable, he had this idea. However, he also knew that this idea of his was rather risky. To be precise, it was rather risky. But this was a rare opportunity and he would reach this step sooner or later. It was better to leave early than to leave late. This adventure might not be able to resolve the future crisis, but at least with the tiger skin of Zhong Xinxiu, no matter if it was Elysium or those righteous sects, they would not find trouble with him for a while. "What should we do next?" Mei Qinglian asked. "Are you interested in rebuilding the Yin Demon sect?" Mei Qinglian was stunned at first, then her beautiful eyes flashed with a glimmer of excitement as she said, "It's time." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "It's almost time. During this period, neither the righteous sects nor Elysium will find trouble with us. So if we don't take advantage of this time to quickly develop our saint sect, when will we wait? A month later, gather all the forces under my command to the Kunlun Mountain for a discussion. It's time to discuss the structure of our saint sect." Being able to rebuild the Yin Demon sect was not Mei Qinglian's dream, but a responsibility that she had always been shouldering. When this responsibility was completed, she would be able to let out a sigh of relief. However, when this time came, Mei Qinglian hesitated again. "It's not like you don't know my level. I can manage some chores, but it's an entire sect. How am I going to manage it?" Chu Xiu said, "I'm preparing to restore the structure of the saint sect from 500 years ago. At that time, the Yin Demon sect will still be a vassal sect of the saint sect, but it won't need to build a sect in the outside world. At that time you can do whatever you need to do. You only need to recruit disciples and pass down the Yin Demon sect's techniques. As for managing the sect, I'll naturally help you choose a few reliable people. Basically, you don't need to worry about anything, and the Yin Demon sect will still be able to operate normally." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Mei Qinglian also let out a long sigh of relief. Being able to pass on the legacy of the sect would be worthy of her master and the elders of the sect. Chu Xiu had decided to redesign the structure of the devil sect, but in reality he didn't want to change anything. It would be fine as long as he followed the rules from 500 years ago. The rules set by Dugu Weiwei in the past were actually very suitable for the Kunlun devil cult. Could be said that all rivers run into the sea. The people of the devil sect all had their own personalities and they weren't that easy to discipline. Therefore Dugu Weiwei only had one request and that was enough. There was only one word: obedience. The halls of the Kunlun devil cult were directly under the jurisdiction of the Kunlun devil cult, and these people were also cultivated by the Kunlun devil cult. Just like the Yin demon sect and the phaseless demon sect from before, although they already had inheritances as long as they joined the Kunlun devil cult, they would also become the vassals of the Kunlun devil cult. Their sect masters and other leaders would all be conferred as devil envoys, and their positions were exactly the same as the direct hall masters of the Kunlun devil cult. There was no difference between the two sides. The advantage of doing this was that the Kunlun devil cult didn't need to precisely control everyone. They only needed to control the devil envoys of these vassal sections. As long as they could guarantee their obedience, then the entire sect would be in a state of obedience. This trick was very useful. Just look at the current hidden demon sect. In fact, in the entire hidden demon sect, most of the people were not from the direct hall of the Kunlun devil cult in the past, but from those vassal sections. However, even after 500 years, there were still some people who maintained a loyal and devoted attitude towards the Kunlun devil cult. This was already very difficult. At this time, there were also a lot of forces under Chu Xiu's command. Although everyone recognized Chu Xiu as their master, everyone had their own thoughts and each had their own inheritance. It was very similar to the Kunlun devil cult in the past. It was somewhat unrealistic for Chu Xiu to integrate all of them into the Kunlun devil cult, so it was better to follow the rules from 500 years ago. Just as Chu Xiu was thinking about these things, above the heavenly gate in West Kunlun, countless dark clouds were densely packed, and the atmosphere was so heavy that it seemed like it was about to drip water. That was the aura that Jun Wuxian subconsciously released, and it was simply powerful to the point of being terrifying. All the Heavenly Gate generals, including some other Heavenly Gate martial artists, were hiding in their own palaces at this time and did not make a sound for fear of provoking the Gate Master. They did not know what was going on and they did not dare to ask. It was safer to obediently guard the array seal. In the main hall, Jun Wuxian was expressionless, but everyone could see that the anger in his heart had reached the point of no return. The fifth Qi Song sat below Jun Wuxian. Among the entire Heavenly Gate 9 great generals, only the fifth Qi Song could continue to stay with Jun Wuxian in this state of rage. Frowning, the fifth Qi Song said in confusion, "This doesn't make sense. Why would Zhong Xinxiu get together with Chu Xiu? Cause and effect. Why does this Chu Xiu also have cause and effect on him? He can even make Zhong Xinxiu personally protect him. What cause and effect does he have?" "Go call Zhu Tianxiao here," Jun Wuxian suddenly said. Zhu Tianxiao was the only one among the Heavenly Gate generals who was proficient in the art of divination. What Jun Wuxian wanted to divine, the fifth Qi Song could already guess. However, he advised, "Sect Master, Zhu Tianxiao's 7 divine calculations and the 3 questions of gods and ghosts are reserved for when the seal breaks out. In a little over a year, the divine general rankings will be held. At that time the seal will activate once. With Zhu Tianxiao's 7 divination and 3 questions of gods and ghosts, we'll be able to know which seal will activate in advance. We'll be able to reinforce it in advance so that we won't panic when the time comes. If we use it now, Zhu Tianxiao will not be able to recover in a year's time." Jun Wuxian did not speak but just glanced at the fifth Qi Song. With just this glance, the fifth Qi Song understood what Jun Wuxian meant. He had no choice but to call Zhu Tianxiao over. The Heavenly Gate Divine General Zhu Tianxiao was known to know the heavens. His combat power was almost the weakest among the Heavenly Gate Divine Generals, but he could survive every Divine General ranking, not because of his strength, but because of his attainments in the way of divination. After divination, even if his combat power was insufficient, he would not be eliminated. Moreover, his ability was special, so he would definitely receive some preferential treatment from Jun Wuxian. Unless there was another Divine General with the same ability as him, or even someone who could replace him, appeared. In less than a quarter of an hour, a fair-skinned and chubby man in luxurious clothes with a warm smile on his face was brought in by the fifth Qi Song. He was Zhu Tianxiao. Seeing Jun Wuxian there, Zhu Tianxiao hurriedly went over and said, "Sect Master, you were looking for me?" Jun Wuxian said in a deep voice, "Help me divine Chu Xiu. I want to see what is so special about him that Zhong Xinxiu would protect him for the sake of karma." Zhu Tianxiao nodded and immediately took out all kinds of divination items. There was also a huge 8 trigrams plate and he went back and forth in it. There was only Chu Xiu's name and nothing else. This was almost the most difficult kind of divination. In the past, when Grandmaster Yuanji had divined Chu Xiu, he had needed something related to Chu Xiu and something with Chu Xiu's aura to carry out the divination. But now it was Zhu Tianxiao and he could do it without any effort. Sometimes he didn't even need to use his name. After a long while, Zhu Tianxiao frowned and said, "There's nothing wrong. This Chu Xiu is very ordinary. The only thing wrong is that, if my divination isn't wrong, this Chu Xiu's fate looks like a mediocre and short-lived ordinary fate. It can even be said to be very bad. However, he was able to live until now and even had such achievements. This was simply illogical. Was the heavens messing with him? Wait, there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong. This is the biggest problem." Chapter 1068. Among the younger generation or even the entire martial art practitioners of the pugilistic world, who was qualified to stir up the world? Among them the most outstanding was Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu was an enemy of the Heavenly Gate, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was extremely talented. Such a person, such an existence, how could he be a mediocre short-lived ghost? He must have great luck and great karma on him. Diwu Qisong asked doubtfully, "I say, did you sleep for too long and your divination went wrong? Did it go to someone else? There are many people called Chu Xiu in this world." Zhu Tianxiao seemed to have been humiliated, and the fat on his face was trembling. "Lord Diwu, you can say that I am weak, but you can't say that my divination is inaccurate. There are many people called Chu Xiu in this world, but there is only one person called Chu Xiu who has a karmic relationship with the Heavenly Gate. My 7 divination can deduce 7 layers of karma. Even if there is no name, as long as I am given a little bit of karmic relationship, I can deduce it 7 times. The 7 layers of karma match up with Chu Xiu. There is absolutely no mistake in my divination." Diwu Qisong was also slightly doubtful. He actually believed in Zhu Tianxiao's ability. The other party's attainments in the way of divination were comparable to Su Jing of the Great Light Temple and Xiao Maha of the Sabodhi Monastery. His 7 divination and 3 questions of the deities and ghosts were especially amazing. Every time they were used he needed a long time to recuperate, and the results he could deduce were even more than those 2. Jun Wuxian was expressionless as he said lightly, "Continue the divination." Zhu Tianxiao nodded with a serious expression on his chubby face. He took out a writing brush but the hair on it was scarlet red. With a point of his finger, a bloody hole appeared on his arm. Zhu Tianxiao dipped the brush in his own blood, and drew hideous and twisted runes in the air. By the time all the runes were finished, Zhu Tianxiao's entire body was trembling. His eyes were rolling back and he was trembling as if he was dancing. Indistinct syllables came out of his mouth, like the murmurs of a ghost. A moment later, a cold and sinister aura enveloped Zhu Tianxiao, covering his entire body with demonic runes. Zhu Tianxiao's 3 questions of gods and ghosts wasn't an orthodox Taoist or Buddhist divination technique. Instead, it was a secret technique of an ancient barbarian tribe. To be more precise, it was an evil technique. Before the ancient era, it should be said to be the legendary immemorial era. It was said that in that era, immortals and Buddhas were everywhere and gods and demons ran amok. Now, even though they had already died, their wills were still fused with the heavens and earth, immortal and indestructible. The 3 questions of gods and ghosts asked about using one's own blood as a sacrifice to draw demonic marks, causing the will of the demon god or evil god wandering between heaven and earth to possess one's body and interrogate them. However, the price of sacrificing essence blood and the evil god's possession was too great. Even with Zhu Tianxiao's true fire spirit refinement realm cultivation, he couldn't bear the consumption. So, after using it once he often needed several years to recover. Jun Wuxian and Diwu Qisong stood there watching Zhu Tianxiao dance. The scene was very comical but their expressions were very serious. After a while, Zhu Tianxiao suddenly stopped trembling. The demonic marks on his face quickly disappeared, and he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, falling to the ground. Diwu Qisong quickly went over to help him up, and asked in surprise, "What happened?" This wasn't the first time that Zhu Tianxiao had used the 3 questions of gods and ghosts, but this had never happened before. The wills of the ghosts and gods were very fair. As long as one accepted the blood sacrifice, they would definitely not harm anyone's life, unless one was weak and still had to use such a forbidden technique. Zhu Tianxiao's face had a trace of shock, as if he had seen something terrifying. "I saw a huge hand and it erased everything that had to do with Chu Xiu. I wanted to test it out and follow that hand to find the person behind it, but I was instantly devoured by it." The wills of the gods and demons that I summoned even dissipated directly. Jun Wuxian was slightly moved. Now he could be sure that Chu Xiu was really not an ordinary person. He might really have some mysterious karma on him. Can you estimate what kind of existence the owner of that hand is? Jun Wuxian asked. Zhu Tianxiao smiled bitterly and said, I can't find out at all. The existence of the other party is already beyond my imagination. Jun Wuxian nodded and waved his hand saying, Go get a bottle of Green Dragon Emu Life Reversal Elixir. You don't have to participate in the ranking of divine generals this time. Zhu Tianxiao was shocked when he heard that. There was no need to be so ruthless, right? He just hadn't divined the background of Chu Xiu, but in the end he didn't even have the qualification to be a divine general? Seeing Zhu Tianxiao's expression, Jun Wuxian knew that he was wrong. He said lightly, I mean this time, you just keep the position of divine general. There's no need to compete with them. Zhu Tianxiao let out a long breath when he heard that. He wanted to complain to Jun Wuxian for taking too long to speak, but he didn't have the guts. After Zhu Tianxiao left, Fifth Qi Song said cautiously, Sect Master, it seems that Chu Xiu has secrets on him, and he is also protected by Zhong Xinxiu. I'm afraid we can't touch him now. Jun Wuxian nodded and said lightly, For the time being we can't touch him. Fifth Qi Song frowned slightly. He had followed Jun Wuxian for so many years, and he understood Jun Wuxian's character. Jun Wuxian only said that they couldn't touch him for the time being, but he didn't say that he would never touch Chu Xiu. However, Fifth Qi Song didn't intend to persuade him on this matter. This time their heavenly gates was indeed very sullen. 2 of their divine generals had been killed, but they couldn't do anything to the other party. In particular, Chu Xiu had actually killed Divine Lord Luo in front of him. This made Fifth Qi Song feel extremely sullen. It could be said that if he was given a chance, even he wouldn't let Chu Xiu go. At this time, a storm was set off in the underworld because of the incident at Kunlun Mountain. Previously, the major sects had joined forces to go to Kunlun Mountain, saying that they wanted to destroy the devil cult. The momentum was simply shocking. Everyone thought that this time, Chu Xiu would definitely not be able to hold on. However, who would have thought that not only did Chu Xiu hold on, but he also had a relationship with the world's #1 expert, Zhong Xinxiu. The Lord of the Great Freedom Sky, the most mysterious existence in the entire underworld, was also the strongest existence. He had forced the Heavenly Gate sect master to retreat by himself, causing the entire alliance of the righteous sects to retreat. This kind of power was simply like a miracle. Although this was not the first time that Zhong Xinxiu had made a move, there were relatively few people who had seen it in the primitive demon's cave. Moreover, the matter was not too big. It was only spread by a small number of experts. This time, there were tens of thousands of martial artists who had seen it. Almost instantly, the news spread throughout the underworld. It could be said that this time at Kunlun Mountain, the most outstanding person was not Chu Xiu, but Zhong Xinxiu. Of course, the existence of Chu Xiu would not be ignored. It must be known that Chu Xiu had fought Ling Yunzi in front of everyone. Although there was no winner or loser, it was a draw with Ling Yunzi. Although the current Chu Xiu was not in existence in the heaven and earth mysterious realm, with the current strength and influence of Chu Xiu, it was enough for him to stabilize his position as the supreme of the underworld. If it were not for Wind Manlu's scruples about the face of the righteous sects, he would have probably directly put Chu Xiu on the sovereign list. After this storm, the rise of the demonic path had become a fact. More and more martial artists in the underworld flocked to the Kunlun devil cult. And after a month, all the forces under Chu Xiu's command came to Kunlun Mountain to prepare for a meeting. It was also to discuss the power structure of the entire Kunlun devil cult. The previous peak of Kunlun Mountain had almost been destroyed. During this time, all the disciples who joined the Kunlun devil cult were rebuilding the Kunlun devil cult, so in a month, the main hall of the entire Kunlun devil cult had been built. Of course, there was still no array. It was just for show. Real pellet state martial artists could easily break it. It was not easy to arrange an array that covered the entire hall. It would take Master Yuan Ji and several array masters of the Kunlun devil cult at least 3 months to complete it. At this time in the main hall, Chu Xiu was sitting in the seat of honor. Below him, Lu Jianghe, Mei Qinglian, Chu Wuji and others were all there. There were also Qin Chaoxian, Yu Moya and other martial artists of the Yinma lineage, some martial artists of the Jinwu Hall, people of Shang Tianliang's Merchant City, Chu Yuanxing of the Guanzhong Torture Room, Duanmu Qianshan and Mu Zi of the Blue Dragon Society and so on. Friends like Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng, who had a close relationship with Chu Xiu, were also there. Even the Northern Yan royal family sent Xiang Wu to watch the ceremony. It could be said that this was the first time that all of Chu Xiu's forces had gathered together. Even Chu Xiu himself hadn't expected that he would gather so many forces under him at some point in time. Previously, these forces were too mixed. Maybe once there was a crisis, it would be very difficult for Chu Xiu to mobilize all of them. Now that they were integrated, it was much more convenient than before. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Everyone, 500 years ago the Kunlun devil cult dominated the entire underworld here, pushing our demonic lineage to the peak. But it was also here that our demonic lineage fell to the bottom and lay dormant for 500 years. Some of you here are not from the demonic lineage, but it doesn't matter. What is right? What is a demon? The underworld is chaotic and the world is in conflict. If the victor says he is right, then he is right. If the victor says he is a demon, then he is a demon. With your trust, I, Chu Xiu, have been able to reach my current position. Be it the righteous or the demonic, as long as you are willing to follow me, Chu Xiu, the only thing I can bring you is victory." Among the people present, be it the righteous or the demonic, they all had a close relationship with Chu Xiu. It could be said that their own interests were firmly tied to Chu Xiu's. Just as Chu Xiu had said, they followed Chu Xiu not because they were righteous or demonic, but because they wanted to be the victor in this era of great conflict in the underworld. Chapter 1069. The structure of the Kunlun devil cult that Chu Xiu had prepared was almost exactly the same as the Kunlun devil cult 500 years ago. For example, the Crimson Devil cult, Mei Qinglian's Shadow Devil cult, and the Phaseless Devil cult still retained their sect style. However, they had to set up a branch of their sect on Kunlun Mountain and send people to guard it so that they could pass messages anytime and anywhere. The rest of the organizations that were not part of the demonic path, such as the Blue Dragon Society, also joined the Kunlun devil cult and became its vassals. Just like what Chu Xiu had said, regardless of whether they were righteous or evil, as long as they stood on Chu Xiu's side, Chu Xiu could only bring them victory. The one closest to the righteous sects was actually the Guanzhong torture room. However, the Guanzhong torture room was the first force that Chu Xiu had managed. To put it bluntly, Chu Xiu's prestige was higher than that of Chu Yuanxing and any other torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room. But this time, Chu Yuanxing stood on Chu Xiu's side without hesitation. If Chu Yuanxing's attitude towards Chu Xiu was a little complicated before, then now he was completely grateful towards Chu Xiu. Because Chu Xiu had helped him to avenge his father's death. The hatred of his father's death was absolutely irreconcilable. Divine Lord Luo had killed Chu Kuanga and even destroyed Chu Kuanga's mausoleum after a few decades. This was simply adding hatred to hatred. But Chu Yuanxing couldn't do anything because the other party was the Divine General of Elysium, a legendary supreme existence. In the end, not long ago, there was news that Chu Xiu had killed Tianmen Luo Divine Lord, which caused Jun Wuxian to go to Kunlun to find trouble with him. After hearing the news, Chu Yuanxing got drunk for a whole day. He paid his respects to Chu Kuanga again and directly brought his people to Kunlun. At this moment, there was no need to talk about the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall becoming a vassal of the Kunlun Demon Sect. Even if they wanted him, Chu Yuanxing, to join the Kunlun Demon Sect, he would be willing. Apart from these forces, the rest of the people formed the direct subordinates of the Kunlun Devil cult. The name of the Jinwu Hall didn't need to be changed, but it was directly changed from the Northern Yen Jinwu Hall to the Kunlun Devil cult's Jinwu Hall. The Northern Yen people didn't have any objections to this. Now, Chu Xiu naturally wouldn't continue to be the hall master of the Jinwu Hall. However, the Jinwu Hall was already very large. Chu Xiu didn't think that anyone could be in charge of the Jinwu Hall alone. Therefore, he directly changed the leaders of the Jinwu Hall to 3 people, Tangya, Yanbugui, and Pang Hu. On Chu Wuji's side, he led some of Elder Wei's direct subordinates to establish the 5-demon hall. The purpose was to commemorate the former 5 demons of Nine Heaven Mountain. Of course, the position of the hall master couldn't belong to Elder Wei, so it was held by Chu Wuji. The 9-branch hall under Luo Feiheng was also merged into the Kunlun Devil cult and became one of the halls of the Kunlun Devil cult. Lu Jiang he also rebuilt his Blood Demon Hall and was selecting disciples in the Kunlun Devil cult. What surprised Chu Xiu was that Lu Fengxian also agreed to join the Kunlun Devil cult and establish a branch hall. In fact, with Lu Fengxian's character, he was the worst at this kind of thing. He could stay in the Kunlun Devil cult to help Chu Xiu, but he was not used to establishing a branch hall and managing so many people. He wasn't good at it either. However, his 4 subordinates, Shui Wuxiang, strongly suggested this to Lu Fengxian. They were all generals under Marquis Lu Wenhou in the past. Lu Fengxian was not good at this kind of thing, but they were very good at it. Therefore, with Lu Fengxian as the leader, they established the Demon God Hall. As for the so-called demon lords, Lu Jiang, he wanted to encourage Chu Xiu to create one of the 4 great demon lords and make him the Blood Sea Demon Lord. This would fulfill his wish, but Chu Xiu rejected it. At this time, even Shang Tianliang, who was the strongest among Chu Xiu's subordinates, could not compare to the 4 great demon lords of the past. If he created another demon lord, it would be a joke. When you have the strength, even if you don't give yourself the title of demon lord, the outside world will use it. This was the distribution of power after Chu Xiu rebuilt the Kunlun devil cult. Of course, it was still incomparable to the Kunlun devil cult of the past. Whether it was the vassal forces or the halls, it did not even reach 1/10 of the peak of the Kunlun devil cult. But it did not matter. The Kunlun devil cult still had time to develop. What Chu Xiu lacked now was time. After arranging everything, Chu Xiu could actually go and be a hands-off shopkeeper with peace of mind. The hall masters of the various halls and the other leaders could deal with the miscellaneous tasks. After everyone dispersed, Xiang Wu came over and said goodbye to Chu Xiu. "Official Chu, since there is nothing here, I will go back and report these things to His Majesty." However, His Majesty still hopes that the Jinwu Hall can still stay in the Northern Yan and help the Northern Yan suppress the Jianghu forces. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Of course the Jinwu Hall will stay in the Northern Yan. Only a small number of people will be left to guard the Kunlun Mountain. Not many people have come to the Kunlun Mountain before. Marquis Xiang, why don't you stay a little longer?" Xiang Wu curled his lips and said, "Don't be unhappy if I tell you the truth. There is only a snowy mountain here. What is there to play with? There is not even a banana." Chu Xiu's expression was slightly strange. It was indeed more difficult to find a banana in the Kunlun Mountain than to find a Tianshan snow lotus. After Xiang Wu left, Chu Xiu directly went into closed-door training. Everything that needed to be arranged had been arranged. During this time there should be no trouble for him. The Kunlun devil cult could also develop in peace for a period of time. This time, Chu Xiu actually had the intention to comprehend the mysterious realm of heaven and earth when he went into closed-door training. At present, Chu Xiu had almost reached the peak of the real fire spiritual cultivation realm. He could be said to be invincible among those of the same level. However, Chu Xiu had not yet touched the bottleneck of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. To be precise, Chu Xiu did not have the slightest clue about the entire realm. Comparing the mysterious realm of heaven and earth with the real fire spiritual cultivation realm, the biggest difference between the two was that one borrowed the power of heaven and earth, and the other controlled the power of heaven and earth. The former depended on the heaven and earth and went with the flow. How much power could be exerted, in fact, mainly depended on the heaven and earth. Secondly, it depended on how much power one could borrow. When one reached the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, borrowing became controlling. Controlling a part of heaven and earth, and even changing some of the rules, making oneself the master of this part of heaven and earth. This was the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. Therefore, the key to the mysterious realm of heaven and earth was the control of the rules. In this aspect, Chu Xiu had no clue for the time being. In this aspect, the only person Chu Xiu could ask was Shang Tianliang. In the end, Shang Tianliang's answer was that he did not know either. Whether it was the rules or the bottleneck of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, if you knew it, then you knew it. If you didn't know, then you didn't know. You could comprehend it, but you couldn't say it or describe it. This kind of realm in itself could not be analyzed. Of course, right now, Chu Xiu's situation was still better than Yi Xiaonan's. Yi Xiaonan wanted to surpass the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, but it was a pity that the next realm was simply a fog for him. Right now, Chu Xiu at least had a direction. There were countless successful examples, so he could try again. With this attempt, Chu Xiu tried for 5 months straight away. In these 5 months, the structure of the Kunlun devil cult had already taken shape. The various vassal forces and divisions had also begun to operate normally. In fact, the difference from before wasn't that great. The Kunlun devil cult was far away from the central plains, and the vassal forces were still within their sphere of influence. It was just that there was an additional group of people passing news on the Kunlun Mountains. At this moment, in the secret seclusion room in the main palace of the Kunlun devil cult, Chu Xiu sat cross-legged on the ground. His body was motionless and no energy was being emitted from his body. However, his spirit had been completely released. He was constantly deducing and thinking about the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. At this moment, there was a knock on the door of the secret seclusion room. In an instant, Chu Xiu's spirit had returned. Chu Xiu suddenly opened his eyes. With a wave of his hand, his Gangqi opened the door of the secret seclusion room, revealing Mei Qinglian's figure. "What's wrong? Did those guys from the orthodox martial arts world come up with something again? Or did the divine general of Elysium come to provoke us? Mei Qinglian had a strange expression as she said, neither. It's just that recently Luo Feiheng's 9 divisions sent a piece of news. It's a very strange piece of news. Chu Xiu said in surprise, oh, what news? The reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei has appeared. What? Previously, Chu Xiu had been very calm. However, when this piece of news came out, he had a shocked expression on his face. He even suspected that he had heard wrongly. Mei Qinglian, who was sitting opposite him, also had the same awkward expression. This was because she also knew about the trap that Chu Xiu had set up. Everything was obviously fabricated by Chu Xiu. In the end, a reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei had really appeared. This was simply indescribable. Chu Xiu walked out of the secret seclusion room. With a wave of his hand, his gang qi dispersed the dust on his clothes. He asked, what exactly is going on? You should know that I was the one who set up this trap. Mei Qinglian also had a strange expression on her face as she said, the matter first appeared in a small city in the southern region of eastern Qi. A disciple of a small local aristocratic family, who happens to be 18 this year, publicly announced that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. Today he finally awakened and wants to return to Kunlun to take back his position as the Devil Master. In an instant there were many people who responded. Even an old demonic senior in the true fire spiritual refinement realm who had lived in seclusion for a long time joined him and was extremely respectful to him. Right now, this person has caused quite a stir in the southern region of eastern Qi. Some of the orthodox sects are probably already investigating the truth about him. Chu Xiu frowned and said, he said that he is, and there is even an old demonic senior in the true fire spiritual refinement realm who believes him. The other party didn't join our demonic cult but chose to believe a person of unknown origin. That kid, could he be a puppet of the other party? Mei Qinglian shook her head with a wry smile and said, I really don't know. The reason why so many people believe him is that he has several secret techniques of Kunlun Devil cult. Some of them are even unique martial arts created by the cult master in the early days. Even my Yinmal lineage doesn't have them. Moreover, he also has the scabbard of the cult master Ting Chunyu as a token. The most important thing is that he was only in the inborn realm before, but he skyrocketed to the real pellet state overnight. These things together are enough to make people regard him as the reincarnation of the cult master. Chapter 1070. Chu Xiu listened to Mei Qinglian. Even he had to admit that if that was the case, then the other party was indeed very similar to the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. To be more precise, it was even more similar than what Chu Xiu had fabricated. Are you sure that the martial arts that the other party mastered are the martial arts of the former leader? The scabbard of Ting Chunyu is also real? Chu Xiu was still a little doubtful. Mei Qinglian nodded and said, 90% of it is real. The elder of the Devil Dao who relied on him was the direct descendant of the Devil Cloud Hall, Fang Yundu. He was a big shot of the Devil Dao in the same generation as Elder Wei. However, he had already retired from the Jianghu and hadn't made a move for 70 to 80 years. Even the righteous sects wouldn't find trouble with him. Because he retired from the Jianghu early, other than Elder Wei and the others, we don't have much of a relationship with him. Moreover, he is old-fashioned and doesn't really like us young juniors of the Devil Dao. Previously, when we were about to rebuild the holy sect, Headmaster Ren of the Phaseless Devil sect specially went to look for him. In the end he was scolded by him. He said that in this world, other than the leader, no one was qualified to go to Kunlun, and no one was qualified to rebuild the Devil Dao and so on. At that time, Headmaster Ren thought that the strength of the holy sect was already strong enough. It didn't matter if he had one more or one less person, so he didn't pay much attention to him and didn't tell you about this matter. However, as the direct descendant of the holy sect, Fang Yundu still has good eyesight. He didn't even approve of us but approved of that kid. It can be imagined that the things that kid has on him should be real. And when the news came, I also went to ask Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe also said that those martial arts were indeed mastered by the leader, but they were used before the leader became famous. They weren't as famous as the 3-city destroying arrow and the misty slash. Mei Qinglian said all this in one breath. Even Chu Xiu had to admit that the other party really looked like the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. However, Chu Xiu still said directly, it's fake. At the very least, it's half real, 90% fake, and the remaining half is uncertain. The so-called reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei was just a lie that he made up. The so-called age of 18 was just a lie. He just said it casually to clear his suspicion. After all, in the entire Jianghu, If Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation was the most similar to the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei, it would be Chu Xiu. Now, someone took the lie that he made up and said that he was the real one. This was simply asking for trouble. As for the uncertainty, it was because there was definitely something strange about the other party, and there was definitely something hidden. The scabbard of Listen to Spring Rain, a part of Dugu Weiwei's martial inheritance, had a very suspicious origin. Moreover, in Chu Xiu's opinion, there were two possibilities for the other party's behavior. One was that the other party really had something to rely on and was not afraid of anything. That was why he revealed his identity with such great fanfare. The second was that the other party was purely an idiot. He had reached a certain level of innocence. That was why he revealed his identity with such great fanfare, as if he was afraid that others would not know. Go and make the arrangements. We will go to Eastern Qi later. Chu Xiu directly waved his hand and made a decision. Regardless of whether the other party was real or fake, since the other party could take out so many things that belonged to Dugu Weiwei, it must have some kind of connection with Dugu Weiwei. Chu Xiu must go personally to see what was going on. At this time, in the southern part of Eastern Qi Shu City, this was originally just an ordinary small city in the south. Because it was close to the southern barbarian land, the area was not very good. Only some martial artists who came and went to the southern barbarian 100,000 mountains to collect herbs would temporarily rest here, so the area was not large. However, at this time Shu City could be said to be a place where demons were dancing. Many demonic Dao martial artists gathered here, wanting to worship the reincarnation of Patriarch Dugu. Although Chu Xiu had rebuilt the Kunlun devil cult, not everyone would choose to join Chu Xiu. After all, in the demonic Dao there were many people who did not like Chu Xiu. Another point was that although Chu Xiu was eager to develop his own forces, he did not want any rotten fish or shrimp. Martial artists who wanted to join the Kunlun devil cult either had strength, potential, or ability. You only needed one of these three, but similarly, if you did not even have one of these three, then you would not be able to join the Kunlun devil cult. Some martial artists who were eliminated by the Kunlun devil cult, or those who knew that they did not meet the requirements of the Kunlun devil cult, gathered here at this time to join the reincarnation of Patriarch Dugu. At this time, in a large mansion in Shu City, a young man who looked a little immature but had a face full of pride was listening to the report of his subordinates. He waved his hand lightly and said, "Tell the other martial arts forces in the southern barbarian land that I will give them 3 days to choose. Either they join the sacred sect or they die. I don't want to hear a third choice." "Yes, sect leader." The subordinates nodded respectfully and left. This young man was the person who claimed to be the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. Previously he was just Han Ping, the legitimate son of the Han family, a small local family in Shu City. What big family could there be in a small city like Shu City, which was close to the southern barbarian land? The Han family's strength in Shu City was already considered the top, and his father was only at the Three-Flower realm. There were only 3 counties in the entire southern barbarian land. These 3 counties were not ranked within the Eastern Qi. It could be said that as long as there was a martial Dao Grand Master, it would be a big shot. As a result, this Han Ping had skyrocketed from the innate realm to the real pellet realm overnight. He even claimed that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei and had awakened. This immediately caused a sensation in the entire southern barbarian land and even the underworld. At this time, an old man with white hair and beard and a solemn face walked in and said in a deep voice, "Sect leader, I'm afraid you're being a little careless this time. Although you have awakened now, your strength has not yet fully recovered. If you publicize your identity so early and make the entire underworld know about it, I'm afraid it will be a little dangerous." This old man was the first senior of the demonic Dao to seek refuge with Han Ping. He was the direct descendant of the demon Cloud Hall, Fang Yundu. Han Ping waved his hand indifferently when he heard this and said, "It doesn't matter. With my power 500 years ago, do Su Yun of the Great Light Temple and Ling Yunzi of the Chunyang Dao sect have the courage to make a move in front of me? Also, that Chu Xiu is currently occupying the Kunlun mountain of this deity. Now this deity is giving him a chance. I have already sent someone to deliver a message to him. As long as he personally brings people down the mountain to welcome this deity into Kunlun, this deity will confer him the position of Hall Master. If I don't publicize this, no one will know about this. It's just like you, Elder Fong. If I don't publicize my identity, how will you know who I am and come to seek refuge with me?" Fang Yundu nodded and said, "That's true. However, sect leader, I would like to ask something. In the past, it was said that part of the Demon Cloud Hall's cultivation technique complemented the Demon Wind Hall's. However, that part of the cultivation technique has disappeared. I wonder if sect leader can bestow that part of the cultivation technique to me so that my abilities can improve a little more? Fang Yundu's words were a little probing. In the beginning, Fang Yundu had believed that Han Ping was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. He had quite a number of secret techniques exclusive to Dugu Weiwei, which were all recorded in the Demon Cloud Hall's books. In addition, Han Ping also had Ting Chun Yu's scabbard and some of the Kunlun devil cult's heirloom. After careful investigation, he found that Han Ping was born 18 years ago in the year of Jia Shen. On the day of his birth, there was a heavenly phenomenon. The entire southern region was covered in dark clouds, a storm was raging, and a thunderbolt turned into a ball and blasted right in front of the Han family's door. All of these showed that Han Ping was extraordinary. However, the Han family was too timid. They thought that it was some kind of inauspicious summon, so they gave Han Ping this name, which meant that he would live a peaceful life and not die prematurely and so on. However, when the news of Han Ping's reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei came out, everyone seemed to remember that this was not an inauspicious summon, but a heavenly phenomenon. These were all the results of Fang Yundu's own investigation. Coupled with the previous things, Fang Yundu was very convinced that Han Ping was the reincarnation of the sect leader. In the eyes of an extremely inflexible devil Dao martial artist like Fang Yundu, the Yinma clan had betrayed the holy sect. Who was Chu Xiu to have the qualifications to rebuild the devil sect and ascend to Kunlun? It was like a sparrow occupying a dove's nest. Therefore, Fang Yundu was extremely disdainful of Chu Xiu and even a little hostile. However, when the news of Han Ping's reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei spread, he took the initiative to seek refuge. After verifying these conditions, he became even more loyal. However, as Fang Yundu spent more time with Han Ping, he felt that something was not right. Han Ping seemed to rarely mention the various things about the Kunlun devil cult in the past. He did not know much about the general knowledge of the Kunlun devil cult, even less than Fang Yundu himself. Moreover, looking at the way he did things, it was simply a mess. Basically, he hit his head and came up with an idea without any order to speak of. Was a person of this level really the reincarnation of the sect leader? This made Fang Yundu a little suspicious. Although Chu Xiu did not know the rules and occupied a dove's nest, his strength and ability were recognized by the world. This was something that even Fang Yundu had to admit. However, the ability of the reincarnation of Patriarch Dugu in front of him was simply incomparable to that of Chu Xiu. This time, Fang Yundu really could not bear it anymore, so he opened his mouth to test Han Ping. Han Ping was not an idiot. He could hear that Fang Yundu's tone was a little strange. He sighed and said, "Elder Fang, it's not that I don't want to tell you, but I can't remember. I slept for 500 years, and only 18 years ago did my true spirit finally reincarnate. I only truly woke up a few days ago. The damage was a little too serious, even my memory was damaged and I have forgotten a lot of things. However, Elder Fang, don't worry. In the future, when my strength is restored, my memory will also be restored. Those things that you want, I can give them to you. I will not forget meritorious service. Even if Chu Xiu brings the entire Kunlun devil cult to seek refuge with me now, I will only give him the position of hall leader. As for you, Elder Fang, you will be one of the future 4 great demon lords." Chapter 1071. The scheme that Chu Xiu had set up back then was a lie, but there were too many coincidences in this matter. There was actually someone who coincidentally matched the lie. Han Ping's explanation was reasonable, so Fang Yundu only thought about it for a moment before understanding. After all, the leader had only been born in a small, mediocre family for the past 18 years, so his knowledge was naturally limited. All he could do now was try his best to help the leader recover his previous strength. This way, his memories would naturally be completely awakened, and he would become the demonic Dugu Weiwei of the past. At the same time, what Han Ping and the others did not know was that most of the righteous sect's warriors had already gathered in the southern part of Eastern Qi. Previously, Ling Yunzi and the others had spent a long time searching for Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation, but they had found nothing. Now he had come to them of his own accord. This made Ling Yunzi and the others excited, but in the depths of their hearts, they were actually terrified. This was Dugu Weiwei, the legendary supreme demon lord, a powerful existence that brought endless pressure to the martial world. The unknown was the most terrifying. At least for now, Ling Yunzi and the others knew that the other was in Shu City, and that his strength was not as strong as theirs, but they did not dare to act rashly. They only established a base outside Shu City. In the tent, Ling Yunzi, Lu Changlu, Zhang Daoling, and the other 3 leaders of Taoism were there. The Buddhists had come from the Great Light Temple, and Subodhi Monastery had only sent Rama. The other heaven and earth abstruse realm cultivator, Bukong monk, was in seclusion and did not come. Bukong monk had just awakened from cultivating the undying Zen, and his spirit and primordial spirit were slightly damaged. He went into seclusion. Last time he went to the Kunlun devil cult first because of the urgency of the matter. It would not be too late to go into seclusion after destroying the Kunlun devil cult. In the end, things ended anticlimactically. Bukong monk realized that his primordial spirit was severely damaged, and he had forgotten some things. For example, he felt that Chu Xiu looked familiar, but he could not remember what was familiar about him. So when he returned to Sabodhi Monastery, he went into seclusion. No one could disturb him. In the tent, Ling Yunzi looked at Zhang Daoling and frowned. "Brother Zhang, why didn't the old celestial master come this time? In the entire Jianghu, only he has met Dugu Weiwei face to face. If that person really is Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation, only the celestial master would be able to recognize him." Everyone looked at Zhang Daoling, waiting for him to give an explanation. The last time they went to Kunlun Mountain together, the Taoist master's mansion did not come. In the end, they found out later that the Taoist master's mansion had come, but they did not follow them up the mountain. Instead, they wandered around the foot of Kunlun Mountain. This time they knew what the Taoist master's mansion was up to, and it disgusted them. The celestial master abode's way of doing things was simply too careless. However, they could not say anything about it. However, it would be too much if the old celestial master still didn't show up. After all, everyone in the Jianghu knew that only the old celestial master came from the era of Dugu Weiwei. Now that the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei had appeared, if the old celestial master did not come to identify him, who would? Zhang Daoling coughed and said, "Everyone knows that the old celestial master is old, and has long stopped caring about the affairs of the Taoist master's mansion. His body is getting weaker day by day, and he can only rest in the mountain behind the Taoist master's mansion. Coincidentally, he is not feeling well and is in seclusion to stabilize his condition. He really can't go out, so he did not come." Upon hearing this, the crowd simply didn't know where to start ridiculing. They did not expect that Zhang Daoling, a guy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, would lie without batting an eyelid. It was true that the old celestial master was old. Not counting the monk Bukong who practiced the undying Zen, and the imprisoned Lu Jianghe, there was no one older than him in the entire Jianghu. But everyone knew that the old celestial master was old but strong. Although he was not young, his combat power did not weaken at all. Instead, it was stronger. A few years ago he even fought with Yi Xiaonan. Although he was at a disadvantage, it was not a huge defeat. And everyone knew that the old celestial master was leisurely sunbathing in the mountain behind the Taoist master's mansion. When did he need to rest? Why did he only feel unwell at this time? Everyone looked helpless, but it was not good to fall out with the Taoist master's mansion at this time. When he saw everyone's expression, Zhang Daoling finally understood why the old celestial master told him to be shameless. Sometimes being shameless was really useful. Just like now, everyone knew that he was evading, but they could not do anything about it. It must be said that this feeling was really good. At this moment there was a commotion outside. Everyone frowned. Real martial arts sex Han Jusi stood up and said, "I'll go take a look." He got up and walked out. Instantly the hostility on his face increased. It was Chu Xiu who came to the alliance of the righteous camp. Chu Xiu did not come here to cause trouble, but to gather information. After all, the Kunlun devil cult had just been established. Their information network in the Central Plains was not complete. For the information here, only Luo Feiheng and the Blue Dragon Society in Eastern Qi had passed on some partial information. It was not comprehensive. As for the alliance of the righteous, Chu Xiu was sure that they had studied Han Pingxi thoroughly. They could even dig out his ancestors. "Chu Xiu, what are you doing here?" Han Jusi looked at Chu Xiu with an unfriendly gaze. It should be said that he was very unfriendly. It could even be said that he was hostile. Han Jusi was not from this era. Even if the real martial arts sect still existed, he still felt a little alienated from the current real martial arts sect. Therefore, the person who had the best relationship with him was Yun Mingzi, who was his old rival from 800 years ago. In the end, Yun Mingzi died in the hands of Chu Xiu. Even among the group of warriors from 800 years ago, half of them had already died in the hands of Chu Xiu. Yun Mingzi was dead. The people of the devil sect were also dead. Chu Xiu was like their nemesis. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Don't be so nervous. I just came to ask you some information. You are concerned about the reincarnation of Master Dugu. I'm also concerned about it. How about sharing it?" Han Jusi said coldly. Chu Xiu, don't think that we can't do anything to you. The whole righteous martial arts world can't do anything to you. Today, if it is confirmed that Dugu Weiwei is real, we will immediately get rid of him so that he can no longer cause trouble in Jianghu. Chu Xiu was too lazy to talk nonsense with Han Jusi. He said directly, "Get out of the way." A Taoist sword appeared in Han Jusi's hand, and a wisp of Taoist connotation affected the surrounding power of heaven and earth. However, at the moment when he held the sword, Chu Xiu had already unsheathed the breaking formation saber on his waist. Wherever the devil saber passed, everything was reduced to the power of Yin. Even the power of heaven and earth that was affected by Han Jusi's Taoist connotation was turned into the power of Yin and exploded in front of Chu Xiu's saber. A huge force attacked Han Jusi. It was the simplest and most direct physical force, which was unstoppable. He shouted and gathered all the strength in his body. However, he was still sent flying more than 30 meters away by Chu Xiu's saber and crashed into the door of the tent. His face suddenly turned from white to red, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Chu Xiu with deep horror in his eyes. How long had it been since they joined forces to besiege Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu's strength had skyrocketed to such an extent that he couldn't even take a single saber strike from him. Now, if the 5 of them continued to besiege Chu Xiu, they would probably be crushed. Who could stop Chu Xiu's saber? In fact, during this period of time, although Chu Xiu was thinking about the way out of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, he didn't waste time thinking about it. While he was looking for the bottleneck, the power around Chu Xiu was also condensing and strengthening step by step. Although his combat power didn't increase exponentially, his control over his power had become stronger. The movement of the battle here immediately alarmed Ling Yunzi and the others. They came out one after another and surrounded Chu Xiu and the others in the center, looking unfriendly. Although Chu Xiu had the protection of Zhong Xinxiu, they weren't afraid that Chu Xiu would really have no scruples. Even if Zhong Xinxiu personally came down, as long as they were forced to the bottom line, they wouldn't just let themselves be captured. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Everyone, there's no need to be so nervous. I've already said that I've come this time only to inquire about the situation and see if that fellow is impersonating Sect Master Dugu. After I ask clearly, I will naturally leave. It's just that this Taoist Han Jusi seems to be biased against me and wants to draw his sword in front of me, so I can only be impolite." Ling Yunzi looked at Chu Xiu for a long time and suddenly said, "If that Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation is fake, then what will you do?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Some lies can be said but some can't. When the time comes, I will let him know that if he says something wrong, he needs to pay with his life." Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, Ling Yunzi suddenly said, "Give him the news." From Chu Xiu's attitude, Ling Yunzi seemed to be able to discern something. Chu Xiu didn't seem to want that Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation to be real. When most demonic path martial artists heard this news, their normal reaction would be to be ecstatic. But Chu Xiu was different. His first reaction was to doubt whether the other party was real or not. This attitude was obvious. Chu Xiu was the current leader of the Kunlun Devil cult. He had spent a great deal of effort to finally rebuild the Kunlun Devil cult and become the demon lord who controlled the demonic path. In terms of power and influence, he was even stronger than the current #1 demonic path master, Yi Xiaonan. In terms of strength, Yi Xiaonan was the best among the heroes, but in terms of influence, the moon-worshipping cult was already inferior to Chu Xiu's Kunlun Devil cult. Chu Xiu had finally established his position today by resisting the pressure of the entire Righteous Path sections. But now that the news of Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation came out, he might have to hand over all these things. With Chu Xiu's character, how could he be willing? Ling Yunzi suddenly realized that the current Chu Xiu didn't seem to be an enemy. Chapter 1072. Almost everyone in the righteous martial arts world thought that the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei was real, but Chu Xiu was a direct descendant of the demonic cult, yet he thought that the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei was fake. This was really interesting. In Ling Yunzi's opinion, even if the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei was real, Chu Xiu might say that he was fake. He might even borrow Zhong Xinxiu's hand to eliminate the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. This was all possible. In any case, Chu Xiu's attitude towards this matter was definitely not as simple as the other demonic path martial artists, who just wanted to welcome back the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. So this time, perhaps the two sides were not necessarily enemies. With this thought in mind, Ling Yunzi happily sent a message to Chu Xiu. Looking at the message, Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. His intuition told him that this Han Ping should be fake. Not only because this matter itself was fake, but with this boy's character, It was absolutely impossible for him to be the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. For the past 18 years, this Han Ping's performance was very ordinary. He was just an ordinary martial artist from a small aristocratic family. Relying on the fact that his Han family was the #1 aristocratic family in Shu City, and that he had almost never left the southern territory of Eastern Qi, he was short-sighted, like a frog at the bottom of a well. His actions were somewhat domineering. Some time ago he suddenly awakened and claimed that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. But even after that he was still the same. He did things brainlessly and acted domineeringly. Even after he awakened, the first thing he did was to find a few aristocratic family juniors who had conflicts with him and kill them. But he did not exterminate the entire family, he only killed a few people who blocked him. From this point, Chu Xiu could see that this person was very narrow-minded. Now that he had power, he actually chose to take revenge for a grudge that could not even be considered a grudge. Furthermore, she didn't use her brain when she did things. She had already killed quite a number of people, but in the end there was still a portion of them left. She was either a saint or an idiot. Even if Dugu Weiwei had damaged his brain in the process of reincarnation, he wouldn't have done such a thing. There were also some speculations from other martial artists and so on. In Chu Xiu's opinion, it was simply nonsense. 18 years ago in the year of Jiaxin was a made-up story, and the so-called heavenly phenomenon when Han Ping was born was laughable. The southern region of Eastern Qi was close to the southern barbaric land. The weather was originally very abnormal. It was not strange for there to be a storm at the time of birth. The probability was very high. There was also thunder that fell in the shape of a ball, which was suspected to be the reincarnation of a true spirit. Although ball lightning was not common, it was not uncommon in a place with many thunderstorms in the south. Just ask the locals and you will know. After reading it, Chu Xiu expressionlessly threw the information to Ling Yunzi. At this time Ling Yunzi suddenly said, "Official Chu, why don't we go together, how about it?" Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and thought for a moment, "It's not easy for sect leader Ling Yunzi to invite me, I can't refuse." The other righteous sects were stunned. They didn't know why Ling Yunzi suddenly invited Chu Xiu. But after thinking about it they didn't object. Anyway, they were going to find Han Ping, and Chu Xiu's goal was also Han Ping, so they would meet in the end. At this time in Shu City, Han Ping still didn't know that the biggest crisis had arrived. He was thinking about what he should do next. He had already sent people to Kunlun Devil Cult to pass the news. Chu Xiu now occupied Kunlun Mountain. After receiving his news, he would definitely rush over and welcome him into Kunlun Mountain. Then what? Was he really going to fight with all the righteous sects in the pugilistic world? Just as Han Ping was thinking about this, a few demonic martial arts practitioners ran in a panic and shouted, "Sect leader, it's bad. Great Light Temple, Chunyang Dao sect, Real Martial Arts sect, Forgetful Sword Hut. These righteous sects are all here." Hearing these names, Han Ping's heart also panicked. For someone like him who had never left the southern mountain range in his life, these names almost all existed in legends. He had heard of them but never seen them. At this time, so many people were in front of him. It was very likely that they were the supreme existences of the pugilistic world like the sect leader. This made Han Ping's heart tremble for a moment. But it didn't take long for him to understand. He was now the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei, the sect leader of the devil cult. They should be afraid of him. Why should he be afraid of them? Han Ping forced himself to walk out, but in the blink of an eye, he was surrounded by Ling Yunzi and the others. This made his state of mind, which had just calmed down, suddenly jump up again. Looking at the many powerhouses in front of him, Han Ping's voice trembled slightly. What do you want?" Ling Yunzi and the others did not say a word. They looked at Han Ping with a surprised expression. This was the legendary reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei? Something was not right. This imposing manner, fierce in appearance, this cowardly appearance, this dignified devil lord of a generation, even if something unexpected happened during his reincarnation, he should not be like this. At this time Fang Yundu also felt the strong aura. He took a step and was already behind Han Ping. He looked at the people present and said coldly, "Everyone, do you really want to fight with the sacred sect to the death?" Ling Yunzi and the others did not speak, but Chu Xiu walked in with his people. Han Ping recognized Chu Xiu. He had seen Chu Xiu's portrait. After all, he was still waiting for Chu Xiu to welcome him into Kunlun Mountain. "Chu Xiu, are you here to welcome me into the Kunlun realm after you received news of me coming here? I am the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. Stop them. When I enter Kunlun, you will be the hall master of the devil cult." Chu Xiu's expression did not change at all. He looked at Han Ping. Chu Xiu stared at him for a while before saying, "Welcome you into Kunlun? You said you are the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei?" Fang Yundu shouted angrily, "How dare you? Is the name of the sect master something you can casually call?" Han Ping did not care about this at this time. He quickly nodded and said, "Yes, I am the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding and walked in front of Han Ping. When the other righteous sects saw Chu Xiu's action, they thought he wanted to protect Han Ping. They immediately wanted to move, but were stopped by Ling Yunzi with a wave of his hand. Just when Han Ping was about to say something with a face full of joy, a soft poochie sound was suddenly heard. The formation-breaking knife in Chu Xiu's hand had been unsheathed, and no one knew when it had been inserted into Han Ping's body, directly stabbing him to death. At this moment, everyone was stunned. Even Ling Yunzi and the other righteous sects had a look of disbelief on their faces. Previously, Ling Yunzi had suspected that Chu Xiu would not so easily welcome the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei into the Kunlun devil cult. However, he never expected that Chu Xiu would actually stab the reincarnated Dugu Weiwei to death in front of so many people, in front of countless people from the righteous path and the demonic path. What was he trying to do? Fang Yundu was stunned, then he rushed towards Chu Xiu with a roar. "Chu Xiu, you are treacherous." Fang Yundu was surrounded by threads of demonic mist, affecting the power of heaven and earth around him, swallowing all the power. His whole body was like a terrifying black hole. Chu Xiu's expression did not change at all. When the knife fell, time and space stagnated. Under the ethereal slash, Fang Yundu was shocked to find that his body was actually frozen in place, and he could only watch as Chu Xiu's knife fell. With a loud bang, Fang Yundu's attack and Gang Qi were directly smashed by Chu Xiu. His whole body was sent flying by Chu Xiu's knife, and he vomited blood. Putting away the formation-breaking knife, Chu Xiu said coldly, "Treacherous? Old thing, who do you think you are to be qualified to speak to me like this? Previously, when the phaseless demon sect leader Ren asked you to join my holy cult, not only did you reject him, but you also insulted me. I can't be bothered to lower myself to your level, but now you still dare to shout in front of me? If your eyes are dim, don't come out and continue to show off. Who is the one humiliating my holy cult? This is simply humiliating the sect leader." Although Fang Yundu vomited blood after being attacked by Chu Xiu's knife and was in an extremely sorry state, he still struggled to stand up and shouted, "Nonsense! What right do you have to say that the sect leader is a fake?" Although Fang Yundu had some doubts about Han Ping, it was just a little doubt. In fact, he still trusted Han Ping more. What? As long as Heaven's will is not defeated, the Demon Lord will not die. This is the prophecy left by the heaven-weeping Demon Lord. I can easily kill him now, so what if the Demon Lord is not dead? The Demon Lord is immortal, so if he is dead, then he is not the Demon Lord, he must be a fake. Everyone present was stunned. The Demon Lord was immortal and there was such an explanation? It seemed to make some sense and there was nothing wrong with it. Fang Yundu was stunned and shouted in disbelief, "Then how do you explain the sect leader's martial arts, the sudden increase in his strength, and the scabbard of the demon blade, listen to spring rain?" Chu Xiu glanced at Ling Yunzi and the others. Originally he didn't want to ask in public, but now that Fang Yundu had said it, he couldn't hide it anymore. Therefore Chu Xiu directly waved his hand and said to Han Lei and Song Xiao, "Go, bring all the people from the Han family here, don't miss a single one." This time, Chu Xiu didn't bring too many disciples of the Kunlun devil cult. He only brought Mei Qinglian, Lu Jianghe and a few other confidants. At present, the Kunlun devil cult's power distribution had been completely established. On Eastern Qi's side, there were Luo Feiheng's 9-branch hall and Blue Dragon Society. Since Chu Xiu had come to Eastern Qi, he could completely use these people. There was no need to bring so many people to Kunlun with great fanfare. Not long after, Han Lei, Song Xiao, and the other killers of the Blue Dragon Society came in with more than 100 people. These were all direct descendants of the Han family. Seeing Han Ping's body, the eyes of a middle-aged man with the strength of 3 flower at once prominence suddenly turned red. He lay on Han Ping's body and cried. Chapter 1073. It was a touching thing to see a father cry over the death of his son, but everyone present was indifferent, including Su Si and the others. It wasn't that these monks didn't know how to be merciful. It was because they knew that this reincarnated Dugu Weiwei had been acting tyrannically during this period of time, and it was unknown how many people had died in his hands. Now that he was killed by Chu Xiu, it could be said that an evil person would be dealt with by another evil person. Chu Xiu said to Han Ping's father, As his father, you should know where he got his cultivation and the things that belong to the Holy Church. Tell me. He touched things that he shouldn't have touched and had thoughts that he shouldn't have. This is the result. He deserves to die, but your Han family is innocent. Tell me and I'll guarantee your safety. Han Ping was only 18 years old, and he looked like a shallow person who couldn't hide anything. So Chu Xiu was sure that while others might not know where the things that Han Ping had come from as his father, he would definitely know. But to Chu Xiu's surprise, the Han family head roared and charged at Chu Xiu after crying. He knew that Han Ping had died at the hands of Chu Xiu. When Han Wei and Song Xiao brought him here, they'd already told him. He also knew what kind of existence Chu Xiu was, but he still chose to fight with his life on the line. In other words, he'd lost his own life. The death of his son was irreconcilable. Han Ping was his only son. How could he pretend that nothing had happened and tell him the news? Chu Xiu was slightly surprised when he saw Han Ping's father's actions. But in the next moment, his eyes were completely tainted by the demon qi and became pitch black like a deep pool. It caused Han Ping's father, who was charging forward, to instantly stop in his tracks. His mind couldn't help but sink into the deep pool, and in the next moment he was directly crushed. In an instant, the Han family head spirit and primordial spirit were crushed. He fell to the ground, no longer breathing. Chu Xiu was expressionless. In such a situation he would not hold back. Although it was a bit harsh to eliminate such a small fry, he wouldn't let anyone try to kill him in front of him and still be able to live. He admired the other party's courage to attack him at a time like this. However, he still had to kill him. Seeing this, Su Ci put his palms together and sighed, Amitabha. Lu Jiang, he pursed his lips. These bald donkeys were as hypocritical as ever. When Chu Xiu was killing people just now, didn't you say, Amitabha? Now you've come out to release souls from purgatory? Chu Xiu looked at the group of people from the Han clan and said indifferently, Does anyone know what happened to Han Ping? The one who speaks will live. After a long while, everyone was trembling with fear, but no one said anything. Song Xiao, kill any one of them. As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, Song Xiao had a warm smile on his face. With a slash of his saber, a person's head immediately fell to the ground before he could even react. Does anyone know? 3, 2, 1. Song Xiao, kill another one. Before the group of people from the Han clan could react, Song Xiao swung his saber again, and another head fell to the ground. This time, everyone from the Han clan was so scared that they almost wet their pants. They had never seen such a vicious method. No one said to kill someone, and it was a random one at that. They didn't know at all whose head the next blade would land on, or whether they would be able to survive until the next breath of time. The unknown was the most terrifying. This scene was too much for Su Ci to bear. He sighed and said, Official Chu, don't you think you're going a little too far by not harming family members? Chu Xiu laughed coldly. Abbot Su Ci, now is not the time to be merciful. Not harming family members? What a joke. You've seen Han Ping's information. You should know that during his rise, how many people from the southern region who were hostile to his Han clan have he killed? He killed their leader, and the Han clan rushed forward to completely destroy the remaining people, seizing their power. Within a month, the tiny Han clan has become one of the top powers in the southern region. Do you know how many people have died in the process? They have enjoyed the benefits that Han Ping's sudden increase in strength has brought them. Why can't he harm them? Moreover, Abbot Su Ci, don't you want to know where Han Ping's martial arts and the things he has come from? Seeing that Su Ci had stopped nagging, Chu Xiu turned to Song Xiao and said, Song Xiao, continue. Before he could finish the word kill, someone from the Han clan had already broken down. A Han clan warrior in his 30s was so frightened that he fell to the ground and cried, I'll speak, I'll tell you everything I know. I beg you, please don't kill any more. Chu Xiu squatted in front of him and whispered, Men bleed but don't cry. It's not a good habit to cry. Wipe your tears and tell us what you know, then you don't have to die. You saved the Han clan, you are the hero of the Han clan. The Han clan warrior glanced at the two headless corpses on the ground and the large pool of blood that had flowed out, and he immediately trembled. Bleed but don't cry? Bleeding so much he would rather cry. The Han clan warrior wiped his tears as quickly as possible and said quickly, Actually, we don't know what is going on. A few months ago, Han Ping went to Li City on the southern border with several of his followers to hunt and play. As a result, he came back after half a month and he came back alone. After returning, Han Ping always locked himself in the house to study something. Except for his father, no one else knew. As a result, some time ago Han Ping suddenly became a real pellet stake grandmaster, and he claimed that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei, which shocked us. Sir Chu Xiu, we really only know this, please let us go. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said to Song Xiao, let them go. He touched his chin. It seems that the key to the matter lies in Li City. Where is Li City? Everyone present looked at each other and didn't speak. They were all martial artists of the Central Plains. How would they know where a small border city was? If it weren't for the storm caused by Han Ping, they wouldn't even come to such a small city like Shu City. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly turned his gaze to the Han clan warrior who was just about to leave and said, we just need a guide, you can be our guide. Upon hearing this, the Han family's martial artist almost burst into tears again. This is really bad luck. If I knew this, I would have run away earlier. Li City was another small city near the southern barbarian lands. More accurately, it was the city closest to the southern barbarian lands. It wasn't even under the jurisdiction of the Eastern Qi court. It was a gathering place for a group of merchants and herb gatherers who came and went from the southern barbarian lands. The arrival of Chu Xiu, Ling Yunzi, and the others immediately shocked the small Li City. The martial art practitioners who made a living in Li City might not have seen so many powerhouses in their entire lives. In fact, they might not even have heard of them so many times. However, this small city was only so big. It could even be said that it wasn't a small city. It was more appropriate to say that it was a small town. Everyone walked around here several times, but they didn't find anything unusual. They asked the people in this small city back and forth. They still had an impression of Han Ping. After all, he was bored and came to the 100,000 mountains to hunt. He wasn't afraid of encountering fierce beasts, but they hadn't seen him for a long time. They could all testify that when Han Ping came to Li City, he really didn't take a step out of Li City. But this was very strange. He didn't take a step out of Li City. The city had been built here for so many years, how did he get these things? Could it be that someone gave it to him? After searching for a few days, they didn't find any traces of him. There were already some people from the Righteous Path sects who decided to retreat. Anyway, it was fine as long as it wasn't Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation. As for things like relics, as long as they weren't obtained by people from the demonic path, they actually didn't care much. Lu Jiang, he was still a little resentful that Chu Xiu killed too quickly. If he had known earlier, he would have stayed behind to interrogate him. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin and said, that's not right. There's still something we overlooked. Lu Jiang, he snorted lightly and said, this small place is only so big. What else can we overlook? If the relics left behind by the cult master are really here, then after so many years with so many people in this small city, why haven't they discovered it? Even they haven't heard of the rumors that the cult master came here in the end. At this moment, Chu Xiu's heart suddenly stirred. He asked the Han family martial artist who was leading the way, how long has Li City been built? That Han family martial artist said doubtfully, a few hundred years, right? I need an accurate number. Hearing Chu Xiu say this, that Han family martial artist immediately shuddered. After thinking about it, he finally revealed a crying expression and said, my lord, I really don't know. Normal people wouldn't remember this kind of thing. However, when Li City was built, there seemed to be a monument left behind. There should be a record on it. Chu Xiu waved his hand. Immediately, someone went to the center of Li City to check. Finally, they got an accurate number, 456 years. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. Now, he should be able to confirm that the relics were not in Li City. However, it should be on this piece of land in Li City. Dugu Weiwei's cultivation technique inheritance and listen to Spring Rain's scabbard were all here. This place was very likely the place where Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had their final battle. Normally speaking, after the fierce battle between these two powerhouses in the past, it would definitely be like destroying the heavens and the earth, causing great damage to the ground. However, in that battle 500 years ago, apart from the movements they made at the very beginning, no one knew where they had fought to. There were no traces of them at all. Chu Xiu had only found a green city. However, after they shattered the space inside the green city, they came out again in the blink of an eye. They did not stay in the green city at all. Since they could shatter the space inside the green city, why couldn't they shatter other spaces? The city was only built decades after the two of them fought fiercely. However, before they built it, the space on this piece of land might have already been shattered by Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. Chapter 1074. Chu Xiu was not very proficient in the mysterious aspect of space. Hence, he regretted not bringing Master Yuanji along this time. Otherwise, with his attainments in the Array Dao and his divination skills, he could deduce something. However, there was no one by Chu Xiu's side this time. Even if he had guessed this, there was no way for him to verify it. However, time was not tight anyway. He sent someone back to Kunlun to inform Master Yuanji to come over while he strolled around Li City. There was actually not much to stroll around in this small city. It was filled with a busy atmosphere. The cultivators who came and went to the 100,000 mountains to make a living used this place as a stronghold. The merchants who came and went also bought some local products and so on. There was not even a decent martial arts faction in this place. At this time, Chu Xiu had been in Li City for a long time. He sat on the second floor of a small building and drank wine with Lu Jianghe and the others. He was thinking and observing carefully. The space hidden in Li City had existed for who knew how many years, but it had never been discovered by anyone. So how did Han Ping discover this place? At this time, Lu Jianghe seemed a little absent-minded. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and asked, "You actually have something on your mind?" At this time, Lu Jianghe was not talking nonsense like before. Instead, he said in a low voice, "Actually, I'm really worried. What if we find the place where the sect master and Ning Xuanji last fought and find his corpse?" Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Didn't you complain about the sect master for sealing you for 500 years? When did your relationship with him become so good?" Lu Jianghe waved his hand and said, "You don't understand this feeling. To us, the sect master is a godlike existence. Who would have thought that a god could actually fall? Back when I was in the Blood Soul Bead, I heard the guys from the Earth Demon Hall say that the sect master is dead. I didn't believe it. Although that old Taoist Ning Xuanji is strong, I'm sure that he can't kill the sect master. But if I were to really see the corpse of the sect master today, it would at least be a huge blow to me." It was rare for Lu Jianghe to be sentimental. Just as Chu Xiu was about to say something, he suddenly saw a few warriors of the Xiahou clan walking on the street, causing a great commotion. This time there were also warriors from the Xiahou clan. Although Xiahou Shi's style was often criticized by others and could not be considered a member of the Righteous Tao, every time the Righteous Tao Alliance had an operation, Xiahou Shi would participate. Ling Yunzi and the others were not in a position to chase them away. Therefore, almost all the people from the Xiahou clan were present during this trip. However, their presence was extremely low, and they only followed behind them as bystanders. However, in Chu Xiu's opinion, the quality of the Xiahou disciples was indeed very worrying. For example, when they came to Li City this time, the others were either like the Taoist and Buddhist sects searching there honestly, or they were already prepared to leave. Only the Xiahou clan seemed to have nothing to do. They just strolled around in the city, and a group of low-level disciples were still causing trouble there, which was annoying to look at. Lu Jianghe curled his lips in disdain and said, "It's been 500 years and this group of people from the Xiahou clan is still like this. How immoral." Chu Xiu took a look and said, "Xiahou Zhen is actually quite capable, but the entire Xiahou clan is a piece of loose sand. Each elder has a lot of power, which also caused the disciples of the elders below to be mixed. Xiahou Zhen is the clan master, but these things are not something that he can manage even if he wants to." Although Chu Xiu and the Xiahou clan had a hostile relationship and both sides had clashed several times, in terms of the matter, Xiahou Zhen was still capable, not to mention his strength. Lu Jianghe said in surprise, "It's not the first or second time that the Xiahou clan has caused trouble for you. With your character, it's actually not easy for the Xiahou clan to survive until now. Of course, if you don't like the Xiahou clan now, you can directly kill them." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and shook his head. "There's no need for that, old Lu. Do you know why the Kunlun devil cult was annihilated so quickly back then? It wasn't only because the sect master wasn't around, but also because the Kunlun devil cult was too merciless in what they did. As long as the Kunlun devil cult didn't like someone, they would kill them. When the sect master was around, this wasn't a big deal. With the sect master's strength, even if he wanted to annihilate the entire underworld, he would still be able to do so. But the problem is that other people aren't the sect master, and they don't have the strength to do so. After you do something extreme, other people will also do the same when they face you." Lu Jianghe said doubtfully, "This isn't your style. When did you, Chu Xiu, learn to leave people a way out?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "This isn't about leaving people a way out. People who deserve to be killed still have to be killed, but before doing so, you have to think of a suitable reason. Just like those righteous sects, don't they always use the slogan of slaying demons and defending the Tao to stir up trouble? It's fine to do things shamelessly, but reputation is still needed. Even if you give a simple and comical excuse, it's fine. But the premise is that there must be such an excuse." Lu Jianghe scratched his head. He was very optimistic about Chu Xiu, or rather, he was optimistic about Chu Xiu's shamelessness. In the past, in the Kunlun devil cult, it could be said that there were countless truly ruthless people and strong people. But to find someone as shameless as Chu Xiu, it was really rare. Among the four great demon lords, Heartless Demon Lord was crazy, Martial Demon Lord was crazy, and Heaven Weeping Demon Lord was weird. The only one who was slightly normal was Red Lotus Demon Lord, but he wouldn't play so many tricks. In the past, if there was an existence like Chu Xiu among the four great demon lords of the Kunlun devil cult, even if Dugu Weiwei wasn't around, they probably wouldn't lose so badly. At this moment, Chu Xiu discovered something. He looked at the disciples of the Xiahou clan and let out a soft cry of surprise. There were many vendors that sold various specialties of the barbaric lands of the south in Li City. Those few Xiahou clan disciples had nothing better to do, so they picked and chose from the vendors and haggled the prices indiscriminately. Sometimes they even wanted to seize by force, causing the others to be furious but not dare to say anything. This kind of behavior was just like what Chu Xiu said. They weren't from the direct line of descent of the Xiahou clan, but the descendants and disciples of the Xiahou clan elders. They ran amok in the clan. An old beggar was hiding in the corner of the aisle, basking in the sun and blocking their way. A Xiahou clan disciple directly went up and kicked him. He snorted coldly, "Old thing, don't block the way." Lu Jiang he also frowned. He felt that killing such a person would dirty his hands. Although the Kunlun devil cult was the peak of the devil path in the past, Lu Jiang he dared to guarantee that their Kunlun devil cult really didn't have such a disgusting guy. What kind of ability was bullying the weak? If you want to bully, then bully the strongest few. If this kind of behavior was discovered, they would directly abolish their cultivation and be thrown off the Kunlun mountain. Or thrown from a place where there was no way out. Life and death were all up to fate. What the Kunlun devil cult was angry about was not this kind of bullying behavior, but that they chose the wrong target and humiliated their strength and the reputation of the Kunlun devil cult. Do you want to care about this? Didn't you just say that if you want to kill someone, you need to find an excuse? Now that you have an excuse, how about going to destroy the Xiahou clan? Lu Jiang he looked like he was watching a show. At this time Chu Xiu touched his chin and said, "Interesting. Li City is such a small city in the south. How can there be such a strong person? Is he living in seclusion here or is there something else?" Lu Jiang he said in surprise, "Strong person? Where is he? Why don't I see him?" Chu Xiu pointed to the old beggar and said, "He's over there." Lu Jiang he stared at the old beggar who was kicked to the side by the Xiahou disciple. After looking at him for a while, he frowned and said, "Kid, are you seeing things? This old guy is just an ordinary person. How can he be a strong person?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Ordinary person? No matter what, that Xiahou disciple has the cultivation of the physical invulnerability realm. Can an ordinary person withstand his kick? No matter what, he will vomit blood. I saw it just now." Although that Xiahou disciple didn't use his gang qi, he didn't deliberately hold back his strength in his kick. As a result, the old beggar was unharmed. This is absolutely abnormal. Also, the Xiahou clan is not worth mentioning to us. We can even destroy it with a wave of our hand. But for ordinary people, the Xiahou clan is an existence that they can't afford to associate with. Even if that old beggar doesn't know that the other party is from the Xiahou clan, he should be able to see that the other party is definitely an existence that he can't afford to offend. But just now, there wasn't the slightest hint of fear in his eyes. In fact, it should be said that he was extremely indifferent, as if he had been bitten by a mosquito. Lu Jiang he said doubtfully, "You've speculated so much. What if he really is a low-level martial artist who has only practiced for a few days? It's very normal for his state of mind to suffer some kind of trauma and then come running to be a beggar." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Even if he is a low-level martial artist with our eyesight, can't we see even the slightest trace of it? This in itself is the biggest flaw." Just as Lu Jiang he was about to say something, Chu Xiu had already leaped down and came directly in front of the old beggar. The moment they saw Chu Xiu, those Xiahou disciples were instantly scared silly. Why did this god of death suddenly appear here? It was fine if others didn't recognize Chu Xiu, but as the Xiahou clan who had enmity with Chu Xiu, and their enmity was not small at all, how could they not recognize Chu Xiu? These Xiahou disciples were all muttering in their hearts, "Why did I have to come out? I'm so unlucky this time," and so on. However, Chu Xiu didn't even look at them. He walked directly in front of the old beggar, cupped his hands and said, "Kunlun Chu Xiu greets old senior." The moment Chu Xiu said this, the Xiahou clan martial artist who had kicked the beggar earlier was immediately stunned. His whole body trembled like a sieve, and he was almost scared to the point of wetting his pants. Chapter 1075. Now that Chu Xiu was in Jianghu, although he had not reached the heaven and earth mysterious realm, with his strength and influence, he was definitely a supreme-level powerhouse. What kind of existence could make such a powerhouse call him senior? What did I do just now? I kicked this senior and asked him to get lost? The cultivator of the Xiahou clan wanted to cry but had no tears. What sin did I commit in my previous life that I would die like this today? He was already in a good state of mind because he did not faint on the spot. At this time, the old beggar looked at Chu Xiu with his turbid eyes and asked with a confused look, Kunlun Chu what? Kunlun Chu Xiu. What Chu Xiu? The old beggar was still confused. Kunlun Chu Xiu. Seeing that the old beggar was still confused, Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Senior, you don't have to pretend anymore, do you? Even in such a small city in the southern region, I don't believe that you haven't heard of my name. Others might not be able to see the flaw, but you have forgotten that the biggest flaw is the absence of a flaw. Chu Xiu stared at him without blinking. He did not know whether this person had any connection with the space where Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had their last battle, but there was obviously something wrong with such an unfathomable powerhouse in such an inconspicuous city. In the face of Chu Xiu's intense gaze and powerful aura, the old beggar suddenly revealed a bitter smile and said, It's because of that kid from the Han clan that you all came here, right? One wrong step led to many wrong steps. If it weren't for me being addicted to wine and leaving this place temporarily, that kid from the Han clan wouldn't have entered that space. Later on, I heard that the brat claimed to be the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. If this old man had been ruthless and found an opportunity to kill him, this place might not have been leaked. Chu Xiu of Kunlun, the leader of the devil cult. Of course I have heard of him. His name resounds like thunder in my ears. But listen to me, it's best if you don't go to that place. Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji are in charge of killing and burying. The mistakes they make can only make future generations scratch their heads. Chu Xiu didn't say it clearly before. He just wanted to trick the old beggar. He wasn't sure if the old beggar's existence had anything to do with the place where Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had last fought. He didn't expect that he would really succeed. Lu Jianghe, who was watching from behind, was dumbfounded. Was this even possible? Wasn't Chu Xiu's luck a little too good? The old beggar's previous disguise was flawless. Otherwise, with so many people from the big sects gathering in Li City, he wouldn't have been discovered after so many days. It just so happened that the disciples of the Xiahou clan were courting death today, and it just so happened that Chu Xiu discovered something was wrong. At this moment, the old beggar also glanced at the disciples of the Xiahou clan. Although there was no killing intent in his eyes, there was a hint of disgust. Chu Xiu could also see that the old beggar was not an evil person. He wasn't the kind of person who would kill the innocent. If he really wanted to keep the secret, he could have just killed Han Ping back then. In fact, everything would have been solved. However, he didn't do anything. On the contrary, he was still complaining that he was greedy for wine and delayed things. At this time, Xiahou Zhen of the Xiahou clan also rushed over. He heard that the disciples of the Xiahou clan seemed to have a conflict with Chu Xiu, so he rushed over in a hurry. If it was in the past, Xiahou Zhen would definitely not care about this kind of thing. But now he wanted nothing more than to kill those idiots of his clan. Of all people to provoke, they just had to provoke Chu Xiu. However, when he arrived, he realized that things didn't seem to be as he imagined. The disciples of the Xiahou clan were shivering in a corner, but nothing happened to them. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu was confronting an old beggar. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. He could only stand quietly to the side, wanting to see what was going on. However, when he saw the old beggar's face, he suddenly froze and remembered something. He pointed at the old beggar and said with a slightly trembling voice, May I ask if you were the leader of the beggar sect, burrowing golden light Gua Xiaofeng, Senior Gua? The old beggar looked at Xiahou Zhen and said, You know me? Xiahou Zhen nodded and said with a slightly excited expression, When I was young, I followed the patriarch and met you once, Senior. Gua Xiaofeng shook his head and said, I'm old now, so I don't remember you. But your Xiahou clan is really getting worse with each generation. Xiahou Zhen smiled awkwardly and didn't dare to say anything. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu was a little surprised. This old beggar was actually the former leader of the beggar sect, Gua Xiaofeng? To be precise, he was still the leader of the beggar sect, but he hadn't shown his face for decades. Even the beggar sect itself had become a pile of loose sand, only maintaining a reputation. Basically, it had fallen apart and wasn't considered a force anymore. Under such circumstances, everyone naturally thought that Gua Xiaofeng was dead. No one expected him to still be alive. In fact, apart from the Heaven Alliance, the rest of the 6 gangs only existed in name. Jiangshan Pavilion had become the royal family of Wei country. Although they had lost their country name, they didn't look like a gang anymore. The giant spirit gang had become Chu Xiu's lackey. They helped the martial suppression hall suppress the Northern Yin martial arts world and were reviled by the Northern Yin martial arts world. It was said that the leader, Shen Feiying, was scolded badly, but he enjoyed it. The more people scolded him, the more successful he was as a lackey, and the more useful he was. Although Wind Sweeping Tower was one of the 6 great sects, they had always been a middleman in the martial arts world. They had inserted themselves into the 6 great sects because they wanted to keep a low profile and not attract attention. The Morgue village was destroyed by Chu Xiu. Now, another gang had replaced it, but its strength couldn't be compared to the Morgue village. Chu Xiu didn't even remember the name. The most miserable one was the Beggar sect. Its leader was missing and no one could turn the tide. Therefore it had existed in name for decades. The dignified leader of the Beggar sect had become a real beggar, guarding this place for decades. What did Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji get from the battle? Moreover, Chu Xiu remembered that Guo Xiaofeng was very strong in the past. He was at the true fire spirit refinement realm. But now Chu Xiu couldn't see through Guo Xiaofeng's background. Could it be that he had stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm? At this time Ling Yunzi and the others also arrived. They didn't know about Guo Xiaofeng, but they heard that Xiahou clan had a conflict with Chu Xiu, so they rushed here. Although the righteous sects didn't have a good impression of Xiahou clan, they couldn't really ignore Xiahou clan because they were on the righteous sect's side. When they arrived and saw Guo Xiaofeng for real, everyone was shocked. The former leader of the Beggar sect, the top expert of the 6 gangs before the rise of Qinqing Di, became a real beggar here. What was going on? They had passed by this place several times before and saw Guo Xiaofeng pretending to be a beggar on the side of the road. However, at that time Guo Xiaofeng had used a secret technique to conceal his aura. He had even used a very strange secret technique to make others look away when they looked at him, so he hadn't been discovered by anyone. Until now, Guo Xiaofeng thought that he had been completely exposed, so he removed the secret technique on him. Only then did everyone discover his true identity. Looking at the people in front of him, Guo Xiaofeng let out a long sigh and said, "Everyone, I know you're all looking for that place, but I advise you to go back. I've been guarding that place for decades. Another few decades and there will be no problem. If you enter it now, you may even cause a catastrophe in Jianghu." Hearing this, everyone was stunned at the same time. Guo Xiaofeng actually knew the place where Ning Xuanji and Dugu Weiwei had their last battle, and he had been guarding it for decades. Was he going to monopolize that place? But thinking about it carefully, it didn't seem like it. Because Guo Xiaofeng had a good reputation in Jianghu for decades. The beggar sect was very powerful. Except for those real beggars, the others helped the needy and never asked for compensation. Guo Xiaofeng was also a very decent person. He was definitely not the kind of person who would lose his mind in front of treasures. Chu Xiu said faintly, "Catastrophe? Senior Guo, what is in there that will cause a catastrophe in Jianghu? I only know that the place where the sect leader's last battle took place. I can't just leave the sect leader's corpse there, can I?" Guo Xiaofeng snorted coldly and said, "Who said that Dugu Weiwei is dead? Anyway, I don't know whether he's dead or not, but he's definitely not here." Lu Changlu hurriedly asked a little anxiously, "What about the patriarch of true martial arts sect?" Guo Xiaofeng spread his hands and said, "It's the same. This is the place where their last battle took place, but Dugu Weiwei's physical body and Ning Xuanji's corpse are really not here. Everyone please go back." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Since Han Ping could bring out the things that belong to my holy sect, then even if the sect leader is not here, there should be many things that belong to my Kunlun. I will definitely take these things away." Guo Xiaofeng let out a long sigh and said, "I've heard of your name and I've even heard it more than once. People in Jianghu say that you, Chu Xiu, are decisive and reliable. This time, why aren't you willing to be reliable again? Apart from the accident of Han Ping, as long as you give me another few decades, I will return the things that Dugu Weiwei left behind to you and the things that Ning Xuanji left behind." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "What Senior Guo said is right, but unfortunately, those things belong to my holy sect, so I must take them away today." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Guo Xiaofeng, who was said to have a good character, also showed a hint of annoyance in his eyes. He said, "You devil cultivators are so troublesome. You won't listen to me no matter what I say. If I don't let you in today, what are you going to do?" Chu Xiu pulled out the formation-breaking sword and said faintly, "Senior, if you don't let me in, then I can only force my way in. Then you're looking down on this old man too much. As Gu Xiaofeng's voice fell, his dirty clothes fluttered, and a powerful qi dynamic condensed. He slammed his palm down and the ground cracked. The next moment, a golden coiling dragon rose from the ground, opened its mouth and bit towards Chu Xiu. Chapter 1076. Materialization of stellar energy was a very basic technique, but it was extremely rare to see someone like Gu Xiaofeng, who used the purest form of stellar energy to materialize a golden dragon so lifelike. The golden dragon that broke out from the ground was like a living creature. It even emitted a dragon's might that could make one's heart tremble. Chu Xiu slashed out with the formation-breaking technique in his hand. In an instant, time and space seemed to freeze, and the golden dragon froze in mid-air. As Chu Xiu's ethereal slash fell, the formation-breaking technique's power of returning energy was unleashed to the extreme. The golden dragon was sliced into two by Chu Xiu's slash, but in the next moment, the shattered golden stellar energy turned into 9 dragons, wrapping around Chu Xiu, and a powerful force began to suppress Chu Xiu. Everyone present had a strange look on their faces. Gu Xiaofeng had actually stepped into the heaven and earth elucidation realm. Did this have anything to do with him guarding this place for so many years? Within the seal of the 9 dragons, Chu Xiu formed a seal with his hands, and in an instant, a violent and turbulent demonic aura surged. In an instant, the mournful wails of ghosts and gods sounded in mid-air, and the heavens' weeping blood rain suddenly descended. A blood-colored, hazy shadow of a demonic god reached out and directly crushed 4 of the 9 golden dragons. Using the devil's weeping heaven great compassion mantra to escape, Chu Xiu's demonic flames rose to the sky, rising to the extreme. The Mahakala demonic god appeared behind him, and in an instant, a huge wave of apocalyptic flames bloomed, wrapping Gu Xiaofeng within it. However, before the apocalyptic flames could burn completely, Gu Xiaofeng punched out, and a furious dragon roared. The golden dragon coiled around his body, directly tearing apart Chu Xiu's apocalyptic flames. Both sides had only exchanged a few blows, and Gu Xiaofeng's expression turned solemn. Gu Xiaofeng had heard of this junior, Chu Xiu. It should be said that everyone in Jianghu had heard of Chu Xiu's name. Even in a small place like Li City, Chu Xiu's name was like thunder piercing the ears. However, Gu Xiaofeng really did not expect Chu Xiu's strength to be even more exaggerated than the rumors. At this time, Chu Xiu felt that the Grand Master of the beggar gang, who had been missing for decades, was already a rare kind person in Jianghu. Although he had stopped Chu Xiu, he did not have the slightest intention to kill. Without any killing intent, one would not be able to display one's greatest strength. Moreover, Gu Xiaofeng had not used his domain power since the start of the fight. Perhaps in Gu Xiaofeng's opinion, it was a little too degrading for him to use such a method to deal with a junior like Chu Xiu as a senior. At this moment, Gu Xiaofeng glanced at Luo Mo and the others and could not help but sigh in his heart. He could see that Luo Mo and the others also wanted to enter that place, but they just did not say it. Looking at the people present, Gu Xiaofeng sighed and said, "Everyone, you should know what kind of person I am. Although I am not as good as Chu Kuanga and Chu Juxia, I have not harmed anyone, right? If I wanted to occupy this place, why would I stay here for decades? Everyone listen to me. If you insist on entering, you will only bring disaster to Jianghu." Lu Changlu said in a deep voice, "Sect leader Gu, although you and I have not met before, I still believe in your reputation. However, this place contains the inheritance of our real martial arts sect's ancestors. Our real martial arts sect has been searching for it for 500 years. Now that it is right in front of us, how can we give up? Gang leader Guo, we're not impulsive people. Open that space. If there's anything that's difficult to solve, we'll help you. One person is not good, 2 people are good. It is better to have more people than you alone." Gu Xiaofeng sighed again and could only nod his head in agreement. Lu Changlu might really have come for Ning Xuanji's relics, but the others had their own thoughts. Although Gu Xiaofeng was a kind person, he was not naive. He was also a person who had been in Jianghu for hundreds of years. Naturally, he knew what kind of people this group of people were. If only Chu Xiu had come, he might have been able to stop him. However, there were so many people in front of him. He could not stop them even if he wanted to. Let's clear the surrounding people first so that the power will not leak out and hurt the innocent. After dispersing the warriors and residents of Liqing and sealing the area, Gu Xiaofeng turned around and walked into the alley where he was staying. That alley turned out to be a dead end. Previously, the people outside did not notice anything wrong. However, now that they were brought here by Gu Xiaofeng, they had a feeling that this space was filled with an unreal feeling. It was very strange. Guo Xiaofeng waved his hand and the space was directly torn by him, revealing a colorful entrance. Everyone looked at each other and followed Guo Xiaofeng in. This was not because they really believed in Guo Xiaofeng's character. It was because almost all of the people present were at the peak of the Jianghu. They had the confidence to face anything. After entering that space, everyone was dumbfounded. It was not because of anything else, but because everything in front of them was a little beyond their imagination. They were surrounded by a dark void, but there seemed to be ripples flickering in the world in front of them. Among those ripples, there were actually the shadows of worlds shining. It looked like a primeval forest, but everyone present was sure that it was definitely not the world they were in. The reason was very simple. None of the trees in the forest were familiar to them. Moreover, there was a faint aura coming from that world. The aura was very strong, so strong that it was like a paradise. However, it was definitely a power that did not belong to this world. True fire spirit refinement stage and mysterious heaven and earth enlightenment stage experts were very sensitive to the changes of heaven and earth energy. They could almost immediately notice this. Guo Xiaofeng sighed and said, "Although I have also reached the mysterious heaven and earth enlightenment stage, I still can't imagine how strong Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji were in the past. The battle between the two of them actually broke through the entire world. They fought to another world." Everyone present was shocked. That place, is it really another world? Although they had felt it before and had some vague guesses, they still could not believe it when Guo Xiaofeng said it himself. Guo Xiaofeng nodded and said, "You should be able to feel it too. This is indeed another world. Everyone should have heard of the legend of the Great Ancient Calamity. I suspect that this place is where the ancient experts went during the Great Ancient Calamity." Although everyone present was shocked, they were not too shocked. After all, everyone present stood at the peak of the pugilistic world. They still knew a lot about the ancient secrets of the past. Some people were even a little tempted. That was where the ancient experts were. What would happen if they went to that world? Seeing everyone's gaze, Guo Xiaofeng knew what they were thinking. He quickly said, "Everyone, if you want to go to that world, I advise you to give up on this idea. Although this world is only a line away from you, it is still two different worlds after all. You may never be able to reach it due to the obstruction of the rules of the world. You can see the world on the other side now only because this world has been penetrated by Ning Xuanji and Dugu Weiwei. It is much weaker than normal places. Therefore, there will be some heaven and earth energy that is far beyond our world seeping in. I'm ashamed to say it, but I have to thank this place for being able to cultivate from true fire spirit refinement to mysterious heaven and earth. However, connecting two different worlds is against the great Tao of heaven and earth. Therefore, the world that has been penetrated has been constantly healing in the past 500 years. When I came here a few decades ago, the surrounding ripples could reflect the image of another world. Now, there is only the one in front of us. I believe that in a few decades, this place will be completely healed under the rules of the world." Chu Xiu nodded slightly. Guo Xiaofeng should be right. Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had fought in more than one place. They had also penetrated through the space of Ludu. However, Ludu was not a world. It could only be said to be a separate space. Even so, to enter that separate space, one would need the formation key to crack it. Only Chu Xiu could use the mysterious sky-connecting key to enter and exit at will. The world in front of them was truly another world. Even though it had been penetrated by Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji, it was not easy to enter. At this moment, Ling Yunzi suddenly asked in surprise, "In that case, we can't enter this place. Why did sect leader Guo guard this place for a few decades and stop us from entering?" The corner of Guo Xiaofeng's mouth twitched as he said, "We can't enter the other world, but it doesn't mean that the other world can't enter here. You should have heard of the name, Flying Star Picking Moon Fang Qinglan, the villa master of Qinglan Villa of the previous generation who had an extremely good reputation in the martial arts world. Villa Master Fang's Qinglan Villa has sheltered countless people with poor lives and can be called unparalleled chivalrous. More than 100 years ago, Villa Master Fang accidentally discovered this place and happened to see someone coming out from the other side using the formation. That person acted arrogantly, saying that he had found the ancestors' land and was going to dominate this world. After seeing Villa Master Fang, that person immediately rushed over to kill him. He was actually a heaven and earth mysterious realm expert, and his methods were strange. Villa Master Fang paid the price of being seriously injured to kill him. Everyone think about it. The world on the other side is extremely rich in the chi of heaven and earth, and the ancient inheritance has not been broken. If the two worlds are truly connected and the ancient powerhouses descend, do you think they will live in peace with us and exchange martial arts? or do you think they will do something else? Chapter 1077. Gu Xiaofeng's indifferent words sent chills down everyone's spines. The current Jianghu orthodoxy was actually of the same origin as the ancient times. Almost all the orthodoxy of the major sects could be traced back to the ancient times. However, if the world of the experts from the ancient times really descended and appeared before their eyes, it would definitely not be like what Gu Xiaofeng had said, where everyone would exchange martial arts in harmony, share the same origin and share the same master and disciple and shed tears when they met. Just look at Han Jusi and the other warriors from 800 years ago. They were only separated by 800 years, and their sects could still be found. But even so, their states of mind were different, let alone the warriors from 10,000 years ago. Of course, there was a deeper conflict between them. The warriors in this world were actually a group of people who had been abandoned. When the ancient calamity came, no one wanted to die. The people who left before had a chance to live, but they did not give it to others. It was unknown how many of the remaining people died after the great ancient calamity. Those who survived managed to rebuild order on top of the ruins, giving rise to the golden age of martial arts in the past 10,000 years. It would have been fine if they did not know the secret of the ancient calamity. But now that they knew, they would inevitably wonder why their ancestors were abandoned. Although they also knew that if they were to encounter such a thing, only those with strength and influence would be able to survive in the end, it was still difficult for them to calm down because of their different standpoints. Everyone was silent for a while. Gu Xiaofeng continued, after Fang Qinglan killed that person, Villa Master Fang knew that someone from the other world could come here, so he guarded here. Until a few decades ago, when Villa Master Fang's old injury relapsed, and his lifespan was almost up, he found me and asked me to continue guarding here. Fortunately, no one from the other world had come over all these years. Perhaps this place with weak space was also an extremely remote place in the other world, and very few people would come here. Now there were only a few decades left. As long as they continued to wait patiently, this space would naturally heal under the effect of the rules of heaven and earth. Zhang Daoling asked curiously, Villa Master Fang and Chief Gua, why did you hide this matter and bear it yourself? Why didn't you announce it to the Jianghu? If all the major sects unite to guard it, it will be much safer than if you guard it alone, gang leader Gua. Gu Xiaofeng glanced at him and said, a disciple of the Celestial Master abode? If the old Celestial Master were here today, he would definitely not ask such a question. The more people there are, the more thoughts there are. Villa Master Fang can restrain his greed, and I can do the same, but we can't guarantee that others can do the same. Some people can only see the benefits in front of them. For these benefits, they even dare to poke a hole in the sky. Do you believe me? Gu Xiaofeng's words were very true. At least a veteran like Ling Yunzi could see it. Fang Qinglan used to be a supreme master. Although he was the only one supporting Qinglan Villa, it was still a top force in Jianghu. In the end, he was willing to give up Qinglan Villa and guard here until his death, which was enough to prove his determination. Gu Xiaofeng was the same. Fang Qinglan chose him as the successor to guard this place, and he was willing to give up the foundation of the beggar gang to stay here. All these could prove that Gu Xiaofeng restrained his greed. But if it were someone else, the result would be uncertain. Some people would do anything for the sake of benefits and power. Everyone present, including Chu Xiu, admired Gu Xiaofeng and the dead Fang Qinglan. If it were them, even if it were Su Ci and Rama who were Buddhist eminent monks, they would have taken the items away immediately instead of staying here to guard this space. At most, they would gather a big sect to think of a solution and share the risk together. If Chu Xiu hadn't discovered Gu Xiaofeng's abnormality, they wouldn't have known that there were two supreme masters in Jianghu who had done so much for the world after the space was healed. Gu Xiaofeng looked at the crowd sincerely and said, everyone, you have seen the situation. Although there is nothing going on here, it is not a big deal. Although there is nothing going on here, once you fight here and affect the operation of the rules of heaven and earth, the two worlds will be connected. At that time we will all be sinners. Gu Xiaofeng chose to stay here to guard, partly for the sake of the people in the world. He didn't want the people of the two worlds to fight here. Besides, he was a man of his word. Since he had promised Fang Qinglan, he must keep it until the end. He really didn't want any accidents to happen in the last period of time. Lu Changlu shook his head and said, Grandmaster Guo, we can promise not to fight, but the true martial arts sect must get the relics of our ancestors. Chu Xiu also said calmly, the things left by our sect master naturally can't fall into the hands of outsiders. As long as no one snatches it, I will not fight. Hearing Chu Xiu and Lu Changliu's words, Gu Xiaofeng didn't feel at ease at all. Although they were just talking, who could really restrain the conflict between the orthodox and the devil? Gu Xiaofeng couldn't stop them now, so he had to let them go. He followed the crowd forward, shaking his head and sighing, Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji are all in the past. Now the martial world is so big, why bother to care about those old grudges? Actually, no one knew whether Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji were dead or not. However, the place where the two of them fought was indeed extraordinarily intense. Dugu Weiwei's storage box and Ning Xuanji's sword were both shattered and scattered here. However, the two of them were nowhere to be seen. Manor Master Fang also guessed that these two should not be dead, but they broke through the void and came to another world. Gu Xiaofeng felt a little regretful when he said this. He was still not ruthless enough, and he didn't have the determination to kill. After so many years in the martial world, Gu Xiaofeng dared to say that everyone he killed had a reason to die. Han Ping accidentally entered this place because of his negligence, and nothing happened for decades. In the end he was drunk, but Han Ping took out some things from inside. When he found out about the matter, as long as he killed Han Ping, or even all the Han clan members who knew about the whole thing, the clues would be cut off, and no one would be able to find Li Qing at all. But because he was Gu Xiaofeng, he was destined not to do such a thing. In this space there was no sense of distance at all. After walking for less than a quarter of an hour, the scene in front of them was constantly changing and trembling. Figures appeared in the void one after another, just like what Chu Xiu saw in Green Capital when Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji fought fiercely. One was dressed in black and the other in a Taoist robe. It seemed blurry and their faces couldn't be seen clearly, but in fact, their auras made everyone present feel like they were looking up at immortals. However, compared to the imprints in Green Capital that were about to dissipate, the imprints in front of them were not only powerful, but they even faintly revealed a fresh aura. It was as if they were watching two powerhouses fight with their own eyes. Everyone was immersed in the image of the two powerhouses fighting. Regardless of whether they understood it or not, even if they could only comprehend a little from it, it was enough to benefit them endlessly. In the face of such power, everyone even ignored some of the things that were scattered on the ground. There were all kinds of ancient books, secret boxes, pills, weapon fragments, and so on. It seemed that the last battle was really intense to the extreme. At this point, the two people had already begun to fight with their lives, and both sides had used their full strength. However, compared to these scattered things, the most precious thing here was still the imprints left behind by the two powerhouses. Han Ping was just an ordinary low-level cultivator, so even if he saw it, he wouldn't be able to understand it. So when he first entered this place, he only took a few pills and cultivation techniques, as well as listened to Spring Rain's scabbard, and left in a hurry. However, he didn't expect that the most precious thing here was something he couldn't take away at all. Gu Xiaofeng looked at the crowd worriedly and sighed silently. In fact, this was what he was afraid of. Everyone in the world was pursuing the ultimate power. Even monks like Su Xi and Rama were the same. Once this place was discovered by them, it would probably be impossible to wait for the rules of heaven and earth to operate peacefully for decades. At this time, Chu Xiu had already recovered from his comprehension of the imprints, and directly grabbed the things that were scattered by Dugu Weiwei in the past. Both Fang Qinglan and Gu Xiaofeng were very commendable people, so they didn't touch the things here. Over the years, only Han Ping took out some inheritance related to Dugu Weiwei, but they were only some cultivation techniques of Dugu Weiwei in the early stage, so they didn't have much effect. Seeing Chu Xiu's action, Su Xi, Rama, and Ling Yunzi moved together and blocked in front of Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Why? I want to take back the things that belong to my holy sect and you want to stop me? I won't touch the things left behind by Ning Xuanji, but I must get the things that belong to sect leader. I must bring them back to Kunlun Mountain." Su Xi shook his head and said, 500 years ago the Kunlun devil cult plundered the resources of the entire Jianghu to support themselves. These things don't just belong to the Kunlun devil cult, they belong to the entire Jianghu. Chu Xiu laughed at Gu Xiaofeng and said, "Sect leader Gu, I really didn't plan to do anything, but now you see, someone is forcing me to do it. The things that belonged to my holy sect 500 years ago still belong to my holy sect now." As his voice rang out, Chu Xiu's figure shot straight towards the items left behind by Dugu Weiwei. Luo Mo and the others immediately acted to obstruct him. The entire battlefield turned into a chaotic battle, and Gu Xiaofeng's expression suddenly changed. Chapter 1078. Previously, everyone in the outside world had agreed that they would not make a move if they could avoid it. But now that they had seen it, no one cared about it except Guo Xiaofeng himself. Guo Xiaofeng wanted to intervene, but what could he do? Should he stop Chu Xiu or Luo Mo and the others? Other than Chu Xiu, Luo Mo, and the others, people like the Shangshuang clan and the Xiahou clan, although they were on the side of the alliance of the righteous sects, they were not part of the righteous sects. To them, as long as they saw something good, they would directly snatch it. They did not care whether it belonged to the righteous sects or the demonic sects. The demonic aura around Chu Xiu's body swept out. The extremely deep and serene demonic aura seemed to have covered all the light. At this instant, the entire space started to tremble. From the illusory imprints left behind by Dugu Weiwa, strands of energy started to wrap around Chu Xiu's body. Although there was only a trace of that power, when Chu Xiu slashed down with his saber, that extremely powerful demonic aura was simply indestructible. It sent Su Ci, who was at the very front, flying with a single slash. At this instant, everyone was dumbfounded. Chu Xiu was actually able to draw upon the power of the seal here. Chu Xiu dared to take the initiative to snatch something. He was not reckless, but he dared to do so only after he was confident. This time Chu Xiu was indeed at a disadvantage. Shang Tianliang did not come, and he had to face the experts of the entire alliance of the righteous sects. So before this, Chu Xiu's plan was to find an opportunity to snatch the most precious thing, then directly turn around and run. But who would have thought that when he tried to comprehend the imprints left by Dugu Weiwei, he found that there was a power in his body that could actually connect with the power in Dugu Weiwei's imprint. That was the power that belonged to Dugu Weiwei's indestructible heavenly demon book. This power had always been hidden in Chu Xiu's body, but Chu Xiu had never been able to use it. In fact, he could only activate it at certain moments. This time, it should be because of the connection between the imprints. Chu Xiu actually discovered that he could use the power of the indestructible demonic book to activate the power of the imprint. Didn't that mean that he was equivalent to the profound understanding realm here? It was just that the other heaven and earth mystic opening techniques were connected to the power of heaven and earth, but what Chu Xiu was connected to was the power left behind by Dugu Weiwei. Demonic flames billowed around Chu Xiu's body, and the Mahakala demon god Dharma idol appeared. Scorching, apocalyptic flames circled around his body, burning everything around him. No one dared to get close to him. The power of the world-extinguishing fire was mixed with Dugu Weiwei's ultimate devil qi, which was enough to extinguish any Buddhist light and Tao connotation. It was even more domineering than the world-extinguishing fire. Everyone subconsciously looked at Lu Changlu when they saw this scene. Chu Xiu was a member of the Kunlun devil cult. He had also received a part of Dugu Weiwei's inheritance. Therefore, no one was surprised that he could activate Dugu Weiwei's power. However, Lu Changlu was also a direct descendant of the real martial arts sect. Could he also activate the power left behind by Ning Xuanji to restrain Chu Xiu? Looking at everyone's gaze, Lu Changlu smiled helplessly. He even suspected that he was a fake descendant of the real martial arts sect. Why was Chu Xiu able to activate Dugu Weiwei's power mark, but he did not have any reaction with the mark left behind by Ning Xuanji? This was unfair. Lu Changlu could not do anything about it, so Luo Amo and the others could only join forces to attack Chu Xiu. Rama put his palms together and chanted Sanskrit. In an instant, countless golden lotuses surged into the world-extinguishing flame and forcefully opened up a passage between the domineering world-extinguishing flame and the devil qi. Chu Xiu's saber slashed down, and powerful demonic qi dyed the entire space pitch black in almost an instant. Wherever it passed by, everything turned into demonic qi and gushed into Chu Xiu's saber, let alone being converted into extreme yin energy. A Buddha's form appeared behind Su Ci. It looked solemn and was radiating a bright Buddha's light. When Chu Xiu's blade slashed down, the Buddha's form put its palms together. In an instant, the golden Buddha's light shone brightly. The powerful Buddha's light turned into Sanskrit and sealed Chu Xiu's blade. At the same time, Ling Yunzi's sword slashed down. Thousands of sword lights condensed into one. The powerful and scorching pure yang sword light instantly illuminated the space. 3 heaven and earth mysterious realm experts besieged him. Apart from Yi Xiaonan, Chu Xiu was the only one in the pugilistic world who could enjoy such treatment. At that moment, Chu Xiu suddenly raised his eyes. Black demonic aura condensed in his eyes, forming a massive demonic aura storm in midair. It tore Ling Yunzi's pure yang sword light into pieces, and sent him flying. Chu Xiu let out a long breath. It felt good to control such a powerful force. However, he didn't dare to control it for too long. After all, this power didn't belong to him. If he controlled this power for a long time, it would be easy to get lost in it. Although the power was borrowed, Chu Xiu still had to rely on himself to use it. Therefore, even if Chu Xiu could control this power, it would still take a lot of effort. If he used it for too long, he might not be able to control the leakage of the power. Therefore, after forcing everyone to retreat, he used the fastest speed to sweep past the things left behind by Dugu Weiwei. After obtaining enough benefits, he directly returned to Kunlun. Just as Chu Xiu was fighting fiercely with everyone, inside the heavenly gate, the short and fat Zhu Tianxiao was sweating profusely. The pen in his hand trembled as he drew strange runes in the air. After a while, Zhu Tianxiao said, "Leader, I have already locked on to Chu Xiu's position. However, something is wrong. Chu Xiu doesn't seem to be in the Kunlun devil cult. Instead, he is in an unpredictable place. There are too many accidents. Why don't we change the time?" After Zhu Tianxiao failed to deduce Chu Xiu's karma, Jun Wuxian said that he wouldn't provoke Chu Xiu for the time being. However, it was only temporary. No one could come out unscathed after killing two of the Heavenly Gate's divine generals. Chu Xiu wasn't Dugu Weiwei. It wasn't to the extent where the Heavenly Gate didn't even dare to think about revenge. Therefore, during this period of time, Jun Wuxian had been thinking about how to bypass Zhong Xinxiu to kill Chu Xiu. It took him a lot of effort to find a secret technique that could do this from the various secret techniques in the Elysium. In fact, to be precise, it wasn't a secret technique. It should be called a magical power. In front of Jun Wuxian, there was a scarecrow with all kinds of evil runes drawn on it. Some of them were even twisting, looking extremely evil. Hearing Zhu Tianxiao's words, Jun Wuxian said lightly, "The head-piercing 7 arrows have been prepared and can't be changed. I only have one chance to use the head-piercing 7 arrows. Using it a second time will consume my source. It's not worth it. Give me Chu Xiu's location." A magical power wasn't a martial skill. For some people, even if they obtained a magical power, they wouldn't be able to use it. There was no way to learn it. Even if the ancient records were placed in front of them, they wouldn't be able to learn it. Others might be able to learn it at a glance. This was the difference. For something like a magical power, if you knew it, then you knew it. If you didn't know it, then you didn't know it. Only in ancient times did magical powers circulate. Ever since the great calamity of ancient times, the cultivation methods of the human race were no longer complete, let alone magical powers. Moreover, although magical powers were powerful, they weren't suitable for martial artists to cultivate. After 10,000 years of martial arts evolution, the current martial arts in Jianghu were very different from the martial arts of 10,000 years ago. It wasn't known if the upper limit had changed, but the lower limit had become very low. It allowed anyone, even if they were disabled, to have the qualifications to practice martial arts. It created a large number of low-level martial artists, and finally ushered in a golden age of martial arts in Jianghu. The magical power of the head-piercing 7 arrows had always been preserved in the heavenly gates. Others wanted to learn it, but they couldn't. Jun Wuxian's own martial arts didn't match this magical power. In the end, he only studied it for a few days before he understood it. After obtaining Chu Xiu's location, Jun Wuxian waved his hand. The blood in his body condensed in the air, turning into 7 small arrows that shot towards the scarecrow that represented Chu Xiu. Zhong Xinxiu could protect Chu Xiu for a while, but she couldn't protect him forever. He didn't believe that the karma on Chu Xiu was big enough for Zhong Xinxiu to take revenge for him. At the moment when Jun Wuxian shot the head-piercing 7 arrows, in the deepest part of the East Sea, a place that even the martial artists of the Windbreaker Sea rarely went to, Zhong Xinxiu sat cross-legged on the back of a sperm whale. He stared to the west and muttered to himself, "Head-piercing 7 arrows? Very vicious. Using karma too much will affect one's destiny." Zhong Xinxiu just muttered one sentence and didn't say anything else. His karma with Chu Xiu was only that one time. Once he made a move, the karma was over. But in the next moment, Zhong Xinxiu suddenly looked up. "Is that the west?" "Wrong again." Zhong Xinxiu patted the sperm whale under him and said, "We're going the wrong way. Please change directions." With a long whine, the giant sperm whale set off waves and changed direction, bringing Zhong Xinxiu to the deepest part of the East Sea. At this time, in the space of Li City, Chu Xiu borrowed the power that belonged to Dugu Weiwei to fight against a group of heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouses. He had already plundered 80% of the things left behind by Dugu Weiwei. But at this time he also felt that he couldn't control this power, so he wanted to call Lu Jianghe and the others to leave. At this moment, an extreme sense of crisis suddenly emerged in Chu Xiu's heart. There was great fear between life and death. This 6th sense was something that every martial artist had. The stronger one's spiritual sense was, the stronger this feeling would be. At this time, Chu Xiu's heart was beating violently, reminding him of the impending danger. Chu Xiu looked at Luo Mo and the others. Although they didn't want Chu Xiu to obtain Dugu Weiwei's things, this wasn't a desperate fight, so no one was desperate. At least no one could threaten Chu Xiu in his current state. But if it wasn't them, then who could it be? Right at this moment, space rippled as 7 blood-red arrows appeared out of thin air, and they shot towards Chu Xiu as though they traversed countless spaces and time. Chapter 1079. The moment the 7 blood-red arrows shot over, Chu Xiu's sense of crisis immediately rose to the extreme. Even the expressions of Luo Mo and the others changed as they looked at each other. The power contained in the 7 blood-red arrows was simply astonishing. It was an extremely evil power that they could not see through. However, they could feel the danger within it. Everyone present had a grudge against Chu Xiu. It could be said that everyone wanted Chu Xiu dead. Could it be that someone had secretly done this? However, everyone present was also at a loss. This level of power was not something they could control. If they could control this level of power, would Chu Xiu still be alive now? The 7 blood-red arrows pierced through the void, seemingly ignoring any power. Chu Xiu gathered all the power in his body and released the small amount of power that belonged to Dugu Weiwei's indestructible heavenly demon book and attacked the 7 blood-red arrows. The first blood-red arrow shattered immediately. The second blood-red arrow exploded into a bloody mist. However, the power that Chu Xiu could control was not much. The third blood-red arrow had already used up the last bit of its power. The remaining arrows continued to attack Chu Xiu. Dugu Weiwei's power had been exhausted. The boundless world-extinguishing fire bloomed. However, the remaining 4 blood-red arrows directly passed through the world-extinguishing fire, causing this move to miss. The misty slash and the breaking formula sword intent slashed out consecutively. However, the 4 blood-red arrows seemed to be in a different space from Chu Xiu. The 2 slashes missed and slashed at the void. Seeing the 4 blood-red arrows getting closer and closer, Chu Xiu let out a low grunt. Boundless bloody mist filled the air around his body. His powerful aura even attracted the power of heaven and earth, causing the entire space to start trembling. Once the blood demon change technique was used, Chu Xiu's side really started to go all out. Gu Xiaofeng glanced at the surrounding space worriedly. However, he did not dare to stop Chu Xiu, who was fighting desperately at this time. A powerful aura descended, but Chu Xiu merely formed a Buddhist seal with his hand. In an instant, a blood-colored Buddha Dharma idol condensed behind him. The blood-colored sun descended from the sky in the dark space. As the blood-colored Buddha formed a Buddhist seal and smashed it forward, even existences at Rama's level would have to treat it with caution. However, it was still useless. Luo Mo and the others who were present also wore solemn expressions. They finally understood that the strength of the person who attacked was simply beyond their imagination. In fact, this power had already surpassed the scope of their understanding. Chu Xiu had attacked several times in a row, and all of them had been killing moves with all his might. If it were them, they wouldn't have been able to resist so easily. However, when faced with these blood-red arrows, only Dugu Weiwei's power had been effective at the beginning, and he had destroyed 3 of them. As for the other 4, even though Chu Xiu had started to go all out, he still could not destroy them. At this moment in Chu Xiu's mind, the inner demon kept shouting, "It's the 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical forms. It's the 7 physical forms. These 7 arrows have locked onto your 7 physical forms. If you don't stop them, your 4 physical forms will be destroyed and you will definitely die." The inner demon resided in Chu Xiu's mind. Even if Chu Xiu died, he would not die. However, the problem was that these 4 blood-red arrows were heading straight for Chu Xiu's 4 physical forms. When the time came, he could not guarantee that these 4 blood-red arrows would avoid him. What's the point of knowing that these things have locked onto the 7 physical forms? The crux of the matter is, how can I stop these damn things? By now, Chu Xiu had used all his trump cards. He had even used a life-risking secret technique like the great skill of blood demon transformation, but the result was completely useless. This power had completely exceeded his imagination. He could not stop it, he could not stop it. Chu Xiu was not someone who would give up easily, but at this moment he could not help but feel a sense of despair. Only those who had died once would know how precious life was. Although Chu Xiu's actions were crazy, he did not want to die and he could not die. In an instant, a layer of flames burned around Chu Xiu's body. It was not the true fire of internal strength, but the primordial spirit fire. What was even more extreme than the burning of chi and blood was the burning of the primordial spirit. Under the burning of the power of the primordial spirit, Chu Xiu began to use the heaven's sun gazing at air skill to deduce the power of the blood-red arrows. No matter what kind of strange secret technique this was, there was no such thing as a perfect martial art in this world. No matter how perfect it was, there would definitely be a loophole. This was the first time that Chu Xiu had pushed the heaven's sun gazing at air skill to the peak, at the cost of burning his primordial spirit. Seeing Chu Xiu in this state, Mei Qinglian and Lu Jianghe both shouted, but they were powerless. In the Jianghu, those at the true fire spirit cultivation realm were already considered strong, but here they were just spectators. In the face of this level of power, they did not even have the qualifications to be spectators. They could only accept their fate. But they accepted their fate. Even if Chu Xiu was really in a hopeless situation, he did not want to accept his fate. In an instant, the primordial spirit fire burned to the extreme. He finally saw it. Behind the 4 remaining blood-red arrows, there were 4 faint dark red lines that connected to a place far, far away, all the way to the west. In the deep and serene hall, the 4 blood-red arrows floated in the air. Opposite them was a crudely made scarecrow with twisted black magic patterns drawn on it. But it was unknown when those black demonic patterns in the dark were pulling countless black threads, connecting the straw doll to Chu Xiu. And there was only one person standing in front of the straw doll, with red hair and a black robe. The coldness in his eyes seemed to be able to freeze everything. Jun Wuxian. Was Jun Wuxian. There had never been an opponent that could make Chu Xiu so afraid. Jun Wuxian, whose strength was beyond imagination, was one of them. Last time, Chu Xiu had thought that he had used Zhong Xinxiu's hand to force the other party to retreat, and also successfully made the other party misunderstand his relationship with Zhong Xinxiu, so he did not dare to touch him. But Chu Xiu had still somewhat underestimated Jun Wuxian. In today's world, the only person that Jun Wuxian did not dare to touch was Zhong Xinxiu. Zhong Xinxiu could protect Chu Xiu for a while, but she could not protect him forever. As long as Jun Wuxian was given a chance, he would not give up on killing Chu Xiu. But the problem was, even if Chu Xiu had pushed the heaven's sun gazing at air skill to the extreme, seeing this, he was even more desperate. It was actually very easy to break the secret skill that Jun Wuxian had displayed. As long as he could take away the straw doll in front of him or block it, it would be enough to cut off the relationship between Chu Xiu and the straw doll. But the problem was, Jun Wuxian could kill him from thousands of miles away. How could he take away the straw doll from thousands of miles away? At this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly found that there seemed to be something wrong with his body. Under the peak state of the heaven's sun gazing at air skill, not a single detail in Chu Xiu's body could be concealed. In his heart meridian, he did not know when there was a trace of devil chi. It was very faint, so faint that if Chu Xiu had not examined it with the peak state of the heaven's sun gazing at air skill, he would not have noticed it. He seemed to vaguely remember that this trace of devil chi was the trace of devil chi that appeared in the rootless sacred flame when he was refining and breaking the array. Chu Xiu did not know what the use of this trace of devil chi was. But at this time he had no other way. He could only use the last trace of his strength to draw out this trace of devil chi. In an instant, Chu Xiu's entire body was enveloped by an extremely dense demonic aura. In his storage box, a statue that looked like a Buddha but not a Buddha appeared in front of Chu Xiu. In the extremely deep devil chi, the statue began to melt. This statue was found by Chu Xiu from the inheritance of the heartless demon lord. Lu Jianghe had said that what was recorded on it should be a remarkable power, but the kind that could not be learned. Later on, Chu Xiu had studied it and even looked for Shang Tianliang to study it together. But in the end he did not gain anything and did not understand it. However, as the demonic aura melted the outer shell of the statue, the demonic patterns on it squirmed like they were alive. Chu Xiu still couldn't understand what they meant, but he didn't know why those demonic patterns were deeply imprinted in his mind. At this time, the 4 blood-red arrows had arrived in front of him. At this moment, Chu Xiu's body suddenly began to expand. It was not the Dharma idol but his own body. Wrapped in the boundless devil chi, his body began to expand. In an instant he was thousands of feet tall, like an ancient demon god standing on the ground. With a punch that seemed to be able to tear the sky and split the earth, shattered a blood-red arrow. In an instant the two forces began to explode, and the entire space seemed to be shaking. But then, everyone took a look and realized that it was not as if the space was really shaking, as if it was going to collapse at the next moment. Everyone's expression changed, and they had no choice but to retreat. Mei Qinglian still wanted to stay, but she was forcibly dragged out by Lu Jianghe. Girl from the Shadow Demon sect, calm down. You don't even have the qualifications to watch a battle of this level. Don't worry, good people don't live long while scourges live for thousands of years. Chu Xiu, that kid is too evil. He won't die so easily. Mei Qinglian looked worriedly at the terrifying power fluctuations coming from the space. The power was so strong that it made her feel as small as an ant. She did not like this feeling of powerlessness. It was just like when the Shadow Demon sect was destroyed in the past, she was also powerless. At this time, Guo Xiaofeng directly fell to the ground and sighed. Destroyed, all destroyed. When Chu Xiu and the others fought earlier, even though there was a great commotion, it was unable to affect this space. But now this power had caused the space to fluctuate. Maybe in a while the two worlds would be completely connected. He had been guarding here for decades, but he did not expect to fail at the last moment. This was Guo Xiaofeng's character. He would not blame others, but he would blame his own negligence, which led to the current situation. Su Xiai, Luo Mo, and the others looked at each other with serious expressions. Regardless of whether it was the strange power of the blood-red arrow or the power that Chu Xiu had unleashed at the end, they were existences that exceeded their imaginations. Previously they thought that they were already at the peak of the Jianghu, and that they could touch the sky with a raise of their hand. But now it seemed that the sky was still very far away from them. Chapter 1080. The power of a divine power was completely different from a martial technique. Only a divine power could block a divine power. Of course, although Dugu Weiwei's power was not a divine power, it was obviously even more terrifying than a divine power. Therefore, Dugu Weiwei's power could destroy a divine power. The demonic pattern on the statue was a divine power. A hidden divine power was purified by the powerful demonic qi around Chu Xiu and branded in his mind. This divine power was called the law embodiment of heaven and earth. With the body of a human, he weighed the power of heaven and earth. Under the law embodiment of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu's body had completely evolved into the powerful demon gods that were nurtured by heaven and earth during the ancient times. The blood-red arrows were aimed at Chu Xiu's 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. This divine power could be said to be extremely evil and strange. It could be said that there was almost no way to block it. However, Chu Xiu was now using a divine power against a divine power. Although it was difficult, he still had the power to fight. The last 3 blood-red arrows were shattered by Chu Xiu's 3 consecutive punches. However, with every punch, Chu Xiu's figure would shrink by a size, and his power would also start to wildly scatter in all directions. When the last punch was thrown, Chu Xiu's law embodiment of heaven and earth could no longer be maintained and was completely shattered. Standing on the spot, Chu Xiu's face was extremely pale. It could be said that there was not a single trace of blood on his face. He was simply like a dead man. This could be said to be the most serious injury Chu Xiu had suffered so far. He had burned his essence, blood and primordial spirit. This had even hurt his foundation and was no longer something that could be recovered in a short period of time. Just as Chu Xiu was struggling to leave, his expression suddenly changed. The silhouettes of Dugu Weiwa and Ning Xuanji's battle that were frozen in the void before were changing and moving. It was as if they were reenacting the scene of their final battle. However, the surrounding space was becoming more and more unstable, and the fluctuations were increasing. This space was already on the verge of exploding. Chu Xiu didn't even dare to imagine how powerful that power would be under the strangulation of the laws of heaven and earth. He wanted to use the last of his strength to escape from this space, but at this time his body was almost empty, and he couldn't even use his true qi to fly. At this moment, everything around them began to distort. Ning Xuanji and Dugu Weiwei's imprint shadows, as well as the image of the other world, began to distort in an instant. Chu Xiu's figure was directly sucked into it. Chu Xiu clenched his teeth and resisted the force with all his might. He had used all his strength, risked his life and used his luck to resist Jun Wuxian's sneak attack. He did not believe that he would die here. The next moment, a ray of light suddenly emerged from Chu Xiu's body. A stone with strange patterns appeared around Chu Xiu, and a layer of golden halo enveloped Chu Xiu. This stone turned out to be the sky-connecting key. Since this thing was smashed with Chu Xiu's physical body in the 6 illusory realms, it had been staying in Chu Xiu's primordial spirit and even helped him cross the space barrier of Ludu. Unexpectedly, at this time the sky-connecting key played a role again. The layer of golden light enveloped Chu Xiu. No matter how the surrounding space was distorted, it couldn't hurt Chu Xiu at all. But at the same time he also lost the ability to move freely. He could only let himself be swept back and forth in the distorted space, not knowing where he was swept to. At this time, Chu Xiu did not notice that the marks left by Dugu Weiwei were also distorted. Among them, one of the marks was staring at Chu Xiu's eyes. Although the face was blurred, it seemed to have intelligence. The next moment, the mark actually left the distorted space on its own initiative. Following the black line of the 7 nails head arrows on Chu Xiu's body, it floated towards the west. Inside the gate of heaven, Jun Wuxian frowned. In front of him, the 7 blood arrows had not come close to the grass doll before they had exploded into a cloud of blood mist. The 7 nails head arrows had been blocked. The power of the magical power was unstoppable, especially when it was the magical power that Jun Wuxian had personally displayed. But now the 7 nails head arrows had failed. Who was it? Zhong Xinxiu again? What kind of cause and effect did this Chu Xiu have on him that Zhong Xinxiu could protect him time and time again? At this moment, the grass doll exuded a demonic aura. The demonic chi coalesced into a blurry shadow dressed in black. Although it was just a shadow, the power it exuded was so strong that it made people tremble. Even Jun Wuxian was suppressed by it to the point that he could not even lift his head. Behind Jun Wuxian, the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared. His body affected the heaven and earth, and the wheel spun rapidly. His fiery red hair fluttered in the wind, and his aura had risen to the extreme. He was Jun Wuxian, the gate master of the gate of heaven. In this world, in this pugilistic world, even Zhong Xinxiu, who was stronger than him, could not make him bow his head. But at this moment, the shadow slapped out, passing through space and time. It was unstoppable and unavoidable. The 6 paths of reincarnation wheel behind Jun Wuxian shattered. He was slapped so hard that he spat out blood and crashed into the stone pillar behind him. After the slap, the illusory figure turned into a thin layer of demonic aura and disappeared. Zhu Tianxiao was also in the main hall. He looked at all of this, dumbfounded. In the gate of heaven, the gate master Jun Wuxian was simply a godlike existence. But now, this god in his eyes was slapped by a shadow, and he was sent flying while vomiting blood. This was simply destroying his worldview. And at this moment, the grass doll that represented Chu Xiu suddenly exploded, turning into a pile of debris. This caused Zhu Tianxiao to be stunned. He knew about the 7 nails head arrows, and it could be said to be incomparably evil. But no martial skill or magic was perfect, and the 7 nails head arrows were naturally the same. Although the grass doll of the 7 nails head arrows could be connected to the target, to really cause damage to the target, only the 7 blood arrows could be used. So, as long as the 7 blood arrows didn't completely kill the target, it meant that the 7 nails head arrows had lost its effectiveness. Just now, he had seen the 7 blood arrows explode into a cloud of blood mist. Why did the grass doll that represented Chu Xiu explode now? The explosion of the grass doll meant that the target had completely perished and was no longer in this world. But without the blood arrows, how did the target die? Zhu Tianxiao didn't have time to think about this carefully. Jun Wuxian was vomiting blood continuously, and it seemed to be very serious. He quickly went up to him and said, "Gate Master, scram." An angry roar was heard, and Zhu Tianxiao's short and fat body flew out of the hall. Jun Wuxian struggled to get up, his eyes filled with horror. Who was that figure? There was only a hazy shadow, and Jun Wuxian couldn't be sure. But the aura of that figure was very similar to a person he had never seen before, but an existence that all the Gate of Heaven warriors feared. Jun Wuxian didn't dare to think, and he didn't dare to guess. If it was really him, he really couldn't do anything to the Kunlun devil cult. At this time, outside Li City, everyone had already seen the powerful distorted waves that came from the space. When the force became stronger and stronger, and even reached the extreme, Guo Xiaofeng had already thought that the passage between the 2 worlds would be completely opened. In the end, who would have thought that when the force became distorted to the extreme, it collapsed at the same time, and the space began to close up, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Guo Xiaofeng was instantly dumbfounded. What was this? Destruction and construction? The powerful force not only completely destroyed the passage here, but also the passage to the world on the other side. A piece of space disappeared, and at the same time the place where the 2 worlds connected disappeared. Impossible, impossible. Mei Qinglian's face was pale as she muttered to herself. She couldn't believe that Chu Xiu had died there just like that. Lu Jiang, he also had a look of disbelief on his face. It doesn't make sense, that kid Chu Xiu definitely couldn't have died just like that. Compared to the others, Lu Jiang, he actually knew more about Chu Xiu. He had stayed in Chu Xiu's mind for such a long time, and he knew quite a lot of Chu Xiu's secrets. Just based on the fact that Chu Xiu had some kind of connection with Patriarch Dugu, he didn't believe that Chu Xiu would die so easily. But the entire space had already been destroyed, and even he was shocked by that power. It was simply not something that a human could contend against. He wanted to convince himself that in the face of such power, Chu Xiu was still alive. Perhaps even Lu Jiang, he didn't believe it himself. Seeing this scene, Han Jusi of the real martial arts sect sneered and said, Chu Xiu has done many evil things and killed countless people. At this time he didn't die in the hands of other warriors, but he died under the power of heaven and earth. This can be considered as the evil will be punished by God. It can be seen that even God cannot tolerate him. Blood light flashed around Lu Jianghe's body, and his aura was raised to the extreme. The cold aura immediately shocked Han Jusi. Seeing this, Luo Mo and the others took a step forward. Not to mention that Chu Xiu was now dead. Even if he was not dead, with so many righteous experts here, they wouldn't have the chance to act violently. Lu Jianghe gritted his teeth, and directly left with Mei Qinglian and the others. Several mysterious connecting heaven and earth supreme experts were here. At this time it was not rational to fight with them. Han Jusi said in a low voice, "Are we not going to keep them here?" Shadow Demon Sect's Mei Qinglian, Blood Demon Hall's Hall Master Lu Jianghe, they are the top combat power of the Kunlun Devil cult, and their strength is not weak. Lu Changlu shook his head and said, "We can't keep them here for the time being. Don't forget about Zhong Xinxiu. We don't know whether Zhong Xinxiu is only protecting Chu Xiu, or protecting the Kunlun Devil cult." Hearing Lu Changlu say this, Han Jusi didn't say anything more. He had also seen Zhong Xinxiu's strength. Even 800 years ago, there was no such terrifying existence in Jianghu. It had to be said that Chu Xiu's performance last time had indeed frightened many people. Zhong Xinxiu's tiger skin banner was very useful, so useful that even experts like Luo Mo did not dare to act rashly at this time. However, Su Ci, Luo Mo and the others also sighed. Perhaps even they did not believe that Chu Xiu would die so easily. After all, Chu Xiu had the undying demon pill in his body, and he had a record of resurrection. However, the undying demon pill was not truly undying. This time the situation was completely different from the last time. Under this kind of powerful force that could destroy the passage between the two worlds, not to mention the physical body, even the true spirit would be smashed to pieces. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.